Hello, it's 4 p.m. on December 7th, and we are resuming the council meeting from Monday night. Madam Clerk, do we have any regrets for this meeting? Sorry to inconvenience you.
We have regrets from Councilor Lischina.
Thank you. Council, I know we already called for conflicts of interest declarations, but I'll do it again since we're resuming the meeting. Are there any new ones, I mean?
New ones, okay.
I see no new ones. Thank you, everybody. All right. The point we reached before we adjourned because of the witching hour Monday night is we were about to hear from the registered delegation for the applicant on the matter under discussion at the time that we adjourned the meeting. And that is a representative, a planning consultant from the noted firm of Urban Strategies. If the Urban Strategies person is ready, Madam Clerk, would you bring them into the meeting?
So this is Melanie Hare from Urban Strategies, the planning consultant for the application. And she also has staff in attendance also in the council chamber.
All right, welcome.
Good
Welcome, Ms.
afternoon,
Hare.
Mayor. Good afternoon, Mr. Mayor. Good afternoon, council members. I actually want to clarify that Melanie here is actually joining us online.
She's there.
Yes.
And my name is Ewan
We see
June.
her online,
Okay.
and but thank you for your help. Ms. Hare, we look forward to your information.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, Council, and members of the community for their interest in the Upper Kerr Comprehensive Development Plan and Official Plan Amendment before you today. My name is Melanie Hare. I'm a planner and partner with Urban Strategies, Inc. And I apologize for not joining you today, but I actually have a flight scheduled for 5 p.m. today, and I wanted to make sure I could speak to this important item and still be able to get onto that flight. The OPA before you is the result of a comprehensive planning process extending over the last 2 and 3 years. Joining you in person is my colleague Ewan Zhu, who you'll see in front of you now. She's a principal and urban designer with Urban Strategies and has been working closely with me on the file. And online, we also have Tim Arnaud from BA Group, our transportation consultant, and Julie Lesage from Bordner Ladner Gervais, our municipal lawyer. We are all available to answer any questions of the council, but in the interest of time, Ewan and I will speak on behalf of the team as the deputation. We have been working on behalf of the landowners of 588530 Kerr and 131 Spears Road for over 3 years. In the last year, we have also been collaborating with owners of 550 Kerr in an effort to come to a common plan and settle the zoning bylaw appeal process related to 550 Kerr site. None of these parties are developers, and in particular, they're not the developers of Liberty Village, but rather the owners of lands and landlords to the retailers and important community amenities such as Food Basics and Shoppers Drug Mart. They have directed us to work intensively and collaboratively with town staff over the last year to prepare the extensive technical, design, and planning work that demonstrates the appropriateness of the Comprehensive Development Plan and the Official Plan Amendment and the urban design brief that's before you today. I'd like to state that this process has been highly collaborative. And as Mr. Barrett said yesterday, town staff, we'd like to commend them on their efforts to this end. We have been working on the comprehensive development concept with town staff for the last year, and we have invited the owners of 171 Spears Avenue to participate in the master planning work and to cost share in all of this effort. For the record, Dr. Shahidi has been contacted multiple times by myself, by our lawyers, and by the owners over the last year. To date, there has been no interest by the owner of 171 Spears to come to the table and to share the cost and effort required to prepare the comprehensive development plan or in resolving the ongoing tribunal matters. I have also been in contact with Dana Anderson of MHBC, the planner for 171 Spears, as recently as 2 weeks ago, once we were aware of the November 18th submission. In terms of planning, I offer the following thoughts. Oakville is a part of a rapidly growing Greater Golden Horseshoe. The town is forecast to grow by 110,000 people by 2041. That's about 5,500 people a year. And Kerr Village is one of the places in the town that growth is to be accommodated, as per council direction. The 200 people and jobs per hectare referred to at Monday's council meeting is the planned density across such growth areas, such as the entire Kerr Village, but not really anticipated on any one site. The 4.5 hectares being discussed today has the potential to accommodate over 3,000 people, as demonstrated through the comprehensive development plan, over the long term at an overall density of just over 3 times FSI. In the Livable Oakville plan, this site is identified as appropriate for high density development, and in my opinion is appropriate in part as it allows for the remainder of Kerr Village to remain in its Main Street character. The comprehensive development plan and related official plan amendment before you today is not a project or even a zoning bylaw amendment, but an important and only the first step in many planning process that will permit the redevelopment of these lands over time. The OPA and accompanying design brief meet the requirements of the official plan policy 23.7.1 for a comprehensive and coordinated plan for intensification of these lands, a plan that is intended to include the whole block and all 5 parcels. The official plan amendment needs to be followed by a zoning bylaw amendment, site plan process, and building permits before any shovel can hit the ground. In my experience, that means it's likely many years of planning process and opportunities to further refine the concepts and the development and the buildings and the public spaces before first phases of work could commence on the site. For my clients, this official plan amendment represents an opportunity to get clear direction on the ongoing and future investment of the retail uses on the site based on long-term planning potential of the site. The official plan amendment sets out the requirements for any zoning bylaw amendment for future development proposal, including addressing many of the more detailed requirements and some of the responding to the concerns raised by the Residents Association, the BIA, and others related to phasing, land use and retail uses, community amenities, transportation networks, infrastructure, and parkland at a more detailed level. The OPA also sets out the provision for cost sharing, which ensures equity in the development process across all landowners. The request, as I understand from MHBC's November 18 submission, is that the official plan amendment be revised to accommodate more than double the density on 171 Spears than the comprehensive development plan recommended for approval by town staff. Yet there is no justification or demonstration how the scale, massing, transportation, or density on 171 Spears could be accommodated. On the other hand, the comprehensive development plan was prepared across and considering the 4.8 hectares in all 5 parcels on the basis of direction from Livable Oakville and Oakville by Design policies. Land use planning, urban design, and transportation analysis has been conducted and input from the town and the community. The resultant OPA before you sets out the greatest flexibility for Block D or 171 Spears site of all the sites, setting out only a max height of 23 stories. I'm going to ask my colleague, Ms. Zhu, to now continue to talk a little bit more about some of the key comments we've heard, and I will pass to Ewan, please. Thank you for the opportunity to speak.
So I will continue delivering a few message related to message from the design perspective. So since the first submission in February, we have taken into considerations the community comments on the initial plan. And in response, we have refined the comprehensive development plan in terms of location of the building heights, commitments to retail spaces in future development, public amenities, transportation and mobility, and phasing as relates to Metrolinx underpass timing. The CDP plans for a mixed-use site, including over 1,800 new housing units and a range of retail and amenities, including on-site parkland. We've heard lots of comments on transportation and phasing. So since the February 2022 announcement of the Metrolinx deferral, additional transportation analysis has been completed by BA based on the town staff TOR. Taking into account of all approved development activities in the area, the study concludes that 115,000 square meter or 2.1 FSI of development across the site can be built without underpass being in place. This includes all the development potentials identified on 171 Spears, or a total of 48,970 square meter and 2.2 FSI on the 171 land. The comprehensive development plan anticipates that this large site will be developed in phases and is designed to allow for singular phase parcels to come forward or multiple parcels, therefore allowing for the flexibility of future development and the staging of infrastructure. We heard comments on retail and phasing. We appreciate the importance of existing retail to the community, in particular the grocery store and the drugstore. We're of the opinion that the OPA provides for ample retail and amenity space across the site. As you are all aware, the OPA requires the replacement of a grocery store at the scale of 3,000 square meter, which is 30,000 square feet. That's the current size of the food basics on the site. And a minimum of 4,600 square meters of retail across site A, B, and C. And OPA hasn't identified the minimum retail for site D. In addition, as you have realized that you probably noticed that in the urban design brief, we have provided directions on retail and active uses at the base of the building along Kerr and the Spear and the Shepherd and St. Augustine extensions. And this could easily result in over 8,000 square meter of retail, or in square feet, that will be 86,000. And maybe a lot more because depends on how we design the ground level. And it also provides a setting for a variety of retail spaces. So not only the large format grocery, but also medium and small shops and restaurants that contributes to the vibrancy of streets and the public realm. In terms of the phasing and timing of the retail, the planned intention is to retain and replace retail on site, including grocery, ideally without displacement. This can occur once underpass is in place. However, we were asked to also study how the development could come forward prior to the underpass being in place. So that is what is shown in our urban design brief in the phase 1 and 2. And that is just a study. Given the planned realignment of Kerr Street, which will shift westwards, and large amounts of easement that Metrolinx requires on the west side of Kerr Street, that generates restriction on any development over much of the Kerr Street frontage for construction. The early phases can only focus on the central and west portion of the site. In these circumstances, the grocery store may be displaced until it can be rebuilt. It's only if we have to move forward with those buildings. However, the OPA before you provides for more detailed considerations of the phasing at the time of zoning bylaw amendment. The owner are open to discussion on how best to phase the lands and uses such as grocery store through the future zoning bylaw process. So there will be a lot more detailed architecture analysis to understand what's possible on the site. In this OPA, this OPA is the result of a holistic approach to plan for the 4.8 hectare in one of the 6 designated growth areas. Extensive work has been done to support and demonstrate that the CDP can accommodate and represents good planning. It implements the OP provisions to do exactly the same work. The OPA implements a comprehensive development plan, urban design brief, and establishes a clear provision for development. and for future planning approval, beginning with the requirement of ZBA for any development going forward. Town staff has been part of this process and are in support of the plan and OPA. We cannot see the need for a deferral to consider and ask for an increased density on 171 Spears without any basis. In particular, we want to thank town staff for working with us and providing clear directions on the CDP and OPA. On this basis, we encourage council to approve the proposed OPA and endorse the urban design brief as it provides clear long-term directions for planning and investment for this key growth area in town of Oakville. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your submission. Council, do you have questions? Councillor Duddick, Councillor Chisholm, and Councillor O'Meara. Councillor Duddick.
Thank you, Your Worship. Through you, just for clarity, although I was not in attendance at the meeting the other night, I did watch the proceedings completely, so I benefited from the discussion that ensued at that meeting. Specifically in regards to the comprehensive plan, when 550 originally provided their version of a comprehensive plan, it was seen as not complete given the fact that they were basically designing other people's parcels for them, okay? My question is, given 171 Spears, if he hasn't been part of the process, and I accept what you're saying, that he was given ample opportunity, how can you or the group of the landowners design something for that particular property? Okay, that's one of my questions first.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Mayor and Chairman. Thank you for the question, Councillor. It's a great question. The official plan policy asks, the town of Oakville's official plan policy asks for a comprehensive development plan across all 5 parcels. We believe and support town staff in considering that we have not planned by parcel. We've planned across 4.5 hectares of land and have thought about how this site sits in relation to its surroundings, the rail corridor, the major streets, the neighborhood to the south, the extension of St. Augustine and other roads to increase porosity through the site. And that's on the basis of where the comprehensive development plan illustrates and demonstrates what should come forward. The official plan amendment then is reflecting the outcome of that. So.
Okay, Mike, I guess my question is, given the fact that you're referring to a cost sharing, and I understand that would have been the studies and the legal background and everything that was required for your submission, is there an equal cost profiting across the entire property based on how much a landowner owns?
Thank you. Through the chair for the question. The OPA sets out a provision, and I think Mr. Barrett mentioned this, that the equitable part of this is there is a requirement in the OPA that all landowners that participate are part of a cost sharing agreement going forward. So there has been not the opportunity to cost share across going through the technical work. The work has been undertaken by my 3 clients. But going forward, the town has had the foresight in the official plan amendment to say that there would be a provision for a cost sharing agreement so that the parks, the roads, the streets are equitably shared across, not landing a burden on one property over another, as is the density. So that is what the town staff have anticipated and have placed in the OPA, and we completely support that.
Thank you. I guess the other question I have is, and you referenced it early in your delegation about how comprehensive and collaborative you were in terms of reaching out to people. My question regarding the owner at 171 Spears, when I heard information the other evening indicating that there was opportunity to reach out. They didn't connect, vice versa, whether it's on one end or the other. I guess my question is, given that September 8th is when there was a deferral in order to have this meeting, was there contact made by that owner to your group?
There was the contact that that was between planners. Dan Anderson reached out to me on November 22nd to make sure I was aware that that they had submitted a letter to the town. And on, I believe, December 1st, there was reach out by the owner of 171 to one of our owners.
Okay.
Other
so
than that, I'm not aware of other contacts.
Okay, so I'm just trying to confirm that given that time span from September 8th to November 18th, I think you referenced, there was no contact from the applicant to your group other than the 18th indicating there was going to be a submission.
I'm sorry, if I may clarify the question, there was no contact made by the owner of 171 Spears to our group, or I think, well, technically we are the applicant, so.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I meant he being an applicant as well. Okay, that's where I'm referencing. So yeah, that I just needed some clarity as to the time span and whether or not there was ample opportunity whereby that dialogue could have taken place. Thank you very much for attending.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Delic. Councillor O'Meara?
Thank you, Your Worship. Thank you very much for being here, Ms. Hare. My question is with regards to the commercial element here. So I believe on Monday night we heard that the amount of commercial space that is on the properties now will be the same amount that will be in the final development project. Is that correct?
My understanding is the amount of grocery, like the food basics, is currently 3,000 square meters, or about 30,000 square feet. That is to be replaced as per the provision in the OPA. The Shoppers Drug Mart is also about 3,800 square meters, I believe. And so the total requirement as a minimum, at minimum, to be replaced is 4,600. But as Ms. Zhu has said, there is also provision for retail and other type of animating uses that must occur along Kerr and Spears, St. Augustine and Shepherd, and that adds up close to where we are today.
Okay, and so yes, it will be close, and I get that. It is as a minimum. Yes,
at a minimum.
I guess that. So I got the minimum part, but you know, I guess my question is, so right now that plaza serves the existing community with no other units or residents being there. We're looking at adding up to close to 3,000 new residents, but we're not going to, I know at a minimum we could, but there's nothing in this zoning that says at a minimum we should have more commercial for the added 3,000 people that will be living there. The minimum is just what we have now. Is that correct?
Through you, Mr. Chair, the minimum requirement, as the town has proposed it, that's correct. However, this isn't a zoning bylaw, and the official plan amendment also sets out that part of the zoning provisions, the next process that would come forward through the planning process to implement any development, would also be stipulating land uses and other provisions. So it could go beyond that, and there's another step for that as there was more specific development.
Okay, I'll leave it at that. And I certainly do hope the applicants take that as a minimum and are aspiring to make sure that we have a complete community with all the amenities and services that those additional 3,000 people may need. Thank you, Your Worship.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor O'Meara. Councillor Chisholm?
Thank you, Worship. Councillor O'Meara touched on exactly what I was going to ask with respect to it. My concern with the existing is the square footage, the square meters of commercial space is existing right now, but the addition of 1,800 units plus is going to put a lot of stress on the commercial end. I'm hoping, as I've just heard, there will be opportunities to possibly expand that square meters to a larger proportion, knowing what's coming into this development. So It's been answered. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Chisholm. Councillor McNeese.
Through your worship, it's encouraging to hear that the grocery retail may be able to stay, especially if food basics, a discounted one. We know that this area, without a grocery store, could potentially be a food desert. There's other social services in the area related to food. But what sort of guarantee, I know there's sort of a minimum square footage for square meters per allocation, but what sort of, I guess, guarantees could we get that, a grocery store could be maintained?
Thank you through you, Mr. Chair. The guarantees are that we need to come through the town for many more steps, whoever is going to be developing these lands in the future. And at this stage, what you have is the landowners who are the tenant or the landlords for food basics and have been for a long time. I think they understand the value of the community, and the intention going forward would be we would be open to working with the town through zoning bylaw and other mechanisms to speak about phasing of that retail and make sure it's early days and understanding the nature of the retail. The market is the challenge. We can't commit today to something that might be coming in 5 or 10 years, but we certainly have heard loud and clear from the community and the council this is a priority, and we are prepared to work with you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor McNeese. Thank you very much, Ms. Hare, for your time and your information.
Thank you.
Madam Clerk, as this is a planning matter, I think I need to call for any further delegations. Is there anyone else who'd like to look in on this? Well, he just has to say that. I'll repeat the call. Are there any other people here who wish to make a delegation on this matter? Please, sir, come to the podium, identify yourself and your interest, and share your information with us.
Good afternoon. I am David Johnston. I am a professional architect. I have been involved with 171 Spears for over 30 years, even with the previous owner to Dr. Shahidi. So Dr. Shahidi and I have had an ongoing relationship and friendship for over 30 years, and I have participated in many other activities on his other properties. In simple terms, I've read lots of documents. I've listened very carefully. I've listened to Dr. Shahidi. I participated in some of the early meetings with staff when we were all together and all the different planners were involved. After 30 years, Dr. Shahidi does not lie. It's as simple as that. I know it. He's been very kind to me. And basically, there has been attempts at contact, contrary to what has been given today. And I think many people in the room probably understand it just as well as I do. Is it easy for everybody to get together? No. Obviously, they didn't all agree on the cost sharing. They didn't agree on a lot of things. I sat there and I said words in some of the early meetings with staff. So I have not participated for the last 2 years because I have a lot of other business interests and a very active practice. But I'm coming back on behalf of Dr. Shahidi, and we're going to tidy this up. And I think we really, truly need a simple deferral and a little bit of time. Nothing's going to happen quickly. There's no urgency here. There's no life or death. We're not building a hospital or a police station. We're building a community. I chatted with a few people in the audience before the meeting started. They're here and they want to hear more, and they want to be participants in this process. This is a very, very large center. I live in Markham. I'm a heritage architect also. We're involved with many of the larger projects in terms of how they're handled. I think here there's been a little bit of a disconnect, not a big one, and we want to re-engage. I thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Johnson. Other questions? Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Councillor Chisholm?
Sorry, just a quick question, sir. My apologies. Is it safe to say that the disconnect is between the owners of the properties and not in relation to the town? The town, what I've seen in all the writings, the town has been very cooperative in receiving and everything.
Correct.
So the disconnect is really with the owners? Would that be a safe assumption?
I would say that I'm pretty good at meeting people and greeting and talking, and I would say there may have been a disconnect, and there was a disconnect over cost sharing. And as I say, I was there in the beginning when it all went together. Not everybody was happy.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much.
Councillor Giddings?
Sorry about that.
Yes, sir.
Get a little exercise before you
Yes.
get in the car to go back to Markham.
That's right.
You mentioned that you asked for a little deferral. Can you define that? Like, is that,
I
Weeks,
think,
months,
I talked to
years?
Dr. Shahidi. We really think that 3 months would be very easy for everybody to get back together on the same page.
all right, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Councillors, I'm going to ask if there's any more people who want to delegate on this. And seeing none, I'm going to confine it to table now. Kathy Duddick. Wait, Sean O'Meara has his hand up
I had
now.
wanted to ask a question of the delegate.
All
You
right, well
didn't.
then, we'll
I
bring him
apologize.
back, because he's still here.
Thank goodness.
All right, Councillor Duddick, and possibly Councillor O'Meara, and possibly Councillor Chisholm. But Councillor Duddick, you're first. Mr. Johnson, you're welcome back. You would think that we were your fitness trainer or something.
I was just gonna say, you're getting your steps in. The reference you made about having a deferral, a brief deferral. My question is, when Dr. Sheehy, whether it was through Dana Anderson, whoever, submitted the request to the town, were there any supporting documents that went with that, like a planning justification report or a transportation or engineering, all the things that are normal when you submit an application?
I'm not aware of any particular documents, but I'm not aware to all of the correspondence that may or may have not taken place. I believe that there are some studies that have to be done, and he had indicated that he would participate.
Okay, I guess I'll clarify with staff in regards to the time frame for that. And again, as I say, very cautious about the fact that when somebody submits something like this, that we have the appropriate documentation to substantiate the validity of requesting double the amount. So thank you very much, and apologize for calling you back.
It's okay.
Well, before you run away, Mr. Johnson, we have at least two more councillors who have additional thoughts and questions for you, Councillor Chisholm and Councillor O'Meara.
Thank you, Worship. Unfortunately, I'm not directing these questions to you, but rather to staff, Your Worship.
Oh, well, perhaps we could wait
Sure.
until we're done with delegations. Thank you, I appreciate that. Councillor O'Meara, are you, Mr. Johnson, I think we finally can let you relax.
Thank you.
Council, may I confine the matter to table? Any objection? It's confined to table. Now, we have the ward councillors and an interested neighbor in Councillor O'Meara with questions for staff. And I confess, I have a couple myself, depending on whether you've anticipated my questions. So let's start with Councillor Chisholm.
Thank you, Worship. A couple of quick questions of staff with respect to the presentation that was made by Mr. Savillon with respect to the density. There seems to be a very despairing difference with respect to our report and Pierre's report with respect to, I think it was 777 per hectare. So could we clarify on that, please?
Through you, Your Worship, staff did arrive at a different conclusion, and the targets referenced in the presentation are really in place to facilitate transit supportive land use and density And staff reviewed this application through the lens of what's good planning. We reviewed it against the provincial policy statement, the growth plan. And in terms of first principles, it's good planning to coordinate land use and transportation. It's good planning to implement a transit supportive urban structure like the one that's laid out in livable Oakville. It's good planning to provide for an efficient development pattern, which also optimizes the use of significant public expenditures in public transit. The plan before council has been reviewed against the Ministry of Transportation transit supportive land use guidelines. In staff opinion, it is transit supportive in nature. It's located in a part of town that's very accessible. It's within walking distance to the Oakville GO station. There's 7 transit routes on its border, and it's next to a main street.
So we have a density of 777, so that's acceptable with respect to when you're talking about walking to the GO station and so forth in that catchment area? Is that acceptable?
Through your worship, the way those density figures are typically calculated, for example, in Midtown, it's over a larger area. It's not on a site-specific basis, so it includes things like roads and areas that wouldn't typically develop. It's a gross figure. The 777 figure, it's basically a net area based on this site specifically.
And your calculations come from what? You said the transportation, Ministry of Transportation?
So in the growth plan for the Greater Golden Horseshoe, the target that was referenced is 200 people and jobs per hectare, and that's derived from the Ministry of Transportation transit supportive land use guidelines. So that's essentially the minimum amount of density that's necessary to support the level of transit in Midtown.
Thank you.
Mr. Barrett, did you want to clarify that 200 is for the gross area and not the site?
Through your worship, that's exactly correct. In Midtown, it's on a gross basis.
So when people when people calculate a site density and compare it to the gross density in the province's legislation, they're not comparing apples and oranges. I mean, they are comparing apples and oranges. They're not making in effect, an accurate comparison. And we see that a lot, actually, not just on that submission, but it's one of the things we have to continually educate people on. Thank you, Councillor Chisholm.
Your worship, I do have other comments later on, but I'll defer to our colleagues with respect to any other questions.
Lovely. I'm sure we'll get to the point where we need comments. Councillor O'Meara, you're up.
Your worship, if Councillor Dudek wants to go, I might defer to her as the ward councillor, if that's okay.
All righty.
Thank you very
Councillor Dudek.
Thank you very much for the courtesy, Councillor Mayor. I appreciate that. Just sort of circling back to the issue of 171 Spears. Mr. Barrett, can you clarify, first of all, did you receive any documentation along with the letter or the request from the planner for that particular property requesting additional density?
Through your worship, we have not received any supporting studies along with the latest letter from 171 Spears.
Okay. And could you give an outline in terms of what studies would be required and a ballpark in terms of the timing that would be expected? I know the previous speaker referenced 3 months. Me being a bit of a cynic, I tend to look more at the 6-month timeline given, consulting with various groups. Can you just give us an indication on that?
Through you, your worship, the change proposed in the 171 letter with respect to density is about a doubling of the density on site. So what that would translate to is about 400 to 500 more units. That's not a minor change. In my view, we would need a new statutory public meeting to re-engage the public because there would be substantive changes to the comprehensive development plan. In my view, we would need to look at all of the reports and studies that have been submitted. They would need to be updated along with the comprehensive development plan. So in terms of timeline, I would estimate around 6 months plus the time it would take to prepare those studies.
Okay, and if that does not come to fruition, meaning that there's a deferral and there's an opportunity to submit those studies, the owner of that particular property has an opportunity to submit his own OPA. Is that not correct? Which would be specific to that parcel of property.
Through your worship, that is correct. The owner of 171 Spears would have the ability to submit their own official plan amendment submitted by and also supported by their own set of studies.
Okay, thank you. The other question I had relates to the underpass. This is a huge issue that Councillor Chisholm and myself, along with the immediate community, have had considerable difficulty with, given the fact we've now had this postponed on us. How do you even begin to wrap your head around saying we're supporting transportation when that particular area is already under so much demand? I mean, the crossing at Kerr and Spears is horrendous at the best of times. Now we've got the Rain Empire development across the way, and we'll have another one probably down at 50 Spears if the crystal ball indicates. I just don't see how this can work, not only from the transportation standpoint, but also from the standpoint that if these buildings are going to require considerable underground parking to facilitate their parking, structurally, how do you have that going on and then have an underpass built after it? I guess that's my question.
Through your worship, the transportation concerns, we heard loud and clear from the public and council at the statutory public meeting. Our first step was to retain an independent peer reviewer who reviewed the transportation impact study and provided advice to staff through the review process. In straightforward terms, what we did was we looked at what is the capacity of the transportation in the area today. And then we looked at what would the transportation capacity be in the future with the underpass project complete. And the way we structured the official plan amendment before council is we limited the amount of development before the underpass so it matched the amount of trips, the peak trips that the site generates today. So what that means is there wouldn't be a net impact on traffic in the area above and beyond what exists today before the underpass is built. After the underpass is built, we reviewed that scenario as well, and there's enough transportation capacity opened up to accommodate the whole development.
Okay, so then basically you're saying phase one is all that could be accommodated prior to the underpass, is that correct?
Through you, your worship, it's 2.1 FSI, so that would allow phase 1 and 2 as it's illustrated in the urban design brief and as I showed in my presentation on Monday.
Okay. I guess the other question I have, and it's more in terms of process going forward, we have referenced the fact that we're going to be having the zoning bylaw. There's going to be other reports that are coming forward, site plan, for example. What can members of the public expect in terms of their opportunity to participate in the process going forward? After this comprehensive, if it's passed, what opportunities are for the members of the public to participate?
Through you, your worship, the next step of planning development applications would be a zoning bylaw amendment. There already has been one submitted for 550 Kerr, which was appealed to the tribunal. Typically, through a zoning bylaw amendment application, the town will notify residents within 240 meters of that site. They will be invited to a public meeting. There's a link to all of the supporting plans, and there will also be a mandatory public information meeting as well, even before the application is submitted.
Good, thank you. Appreciate the clarification.
Thank you, Councillor Duddick. I think those are very useful questions. Mr. Barrett, could you just expand a little bit on that 240-meter radius? Can the public beyond 240 meters also, who might have an interest, also participate?
Through you, your worship, of course, anybody can participate in that process, even if they live beyond the 240 meters or even in a different city or town.
Thank you. I appreciate that clarification. Councillor O'Meara, I think you're up in the batter's box now.
Thank you, Your Worship. Thank you very much, Mr. Barrett. I heard something very interesting about, and I forget, it might have been from the applicant, about if we put the density at this location, does that ease the pressure to increase density along the Kerr Street corridor from Spears down to Lakeshore?
Through you, your worship, that was the intent of the original plan for Kerr Village, which informed the current livable Oakville plan, and the split was 80% Upper Kerr, 20% Main Street. So 80% of development would be focused in Upper Kerr, and the reason why is because it's centered on a regional transportation corridor. It's within walking distance to the Oakville GO station, and there's sites available that can accommodate larger development.
So residents who maybe live to the west or the east of Kerr Street in that area should want this development and the density to be up there along the rail corridor, less it work its way down Kerr Street as a part of the growth area. Would that be a fair statement?
Through you, your worship, yes, this is the location for the densest development. That's what is currently provided for in livable Oakville, and the development proposal before council is very much consistent with that.
Okay, thank you. This next question might be for Director Stephen. I'm just curious as to know what the status of the Kerr Street underpass is, because it seems like we're phasing in, so we know that it's coming at some point, or we're unsure. I guess I'd like just an update on any conversations we're having with the province on where that is, and secondly, what's the best thing that we can do as a council to encourage the province to get moving and to fund this project?
Through you, Mayor Burton. I'll start with Councillor O'Meara's first question, and then Director Charles and I will jointly answer your second question. So in terms of the current status of the Kerr Street grade separation, is still deferred. We are still working with Metrolinx to try and get it back as an active project. And so we are having conversations with them on a number of fronts related to that. As you'll recall from the report, back in the summertime, we had a few individual items that we were trying to sort through as a result of the deferral. So we're talking to them through that avenue, but also in terms of the bigger picture and the need for that infrastructure project itself. And I turn it over to Director Charles to start us off on the second answer, and then I'll come back and add some more.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, thank you. We have been having a number of conversations with Metrolinx over the last few months with respect to a whole host of issues, including how to accelerate the grade separation. One of the things that does help encourage Metrolinx to move along is to understand what the development pressures are going to be within a given area, whether that's at current Spears, whether that's in Midtown. We are able to demonstrate to them where the demand is, the timing behind that demand, and also how that works into their schedule for how they want to improve their service as well. So by demonstrating that to Metrolinx, we get them to the table and continue to push on that. So I don't know if there's anything else Ms. Stephen has on that.
Yeah. Thank you. This is Director Charles says, we have been meeting with staff from Metrolinx from across different departments and divisions within the Metrolinx team to demonstrate how these individual initiatives fit into the bigger picture, both in terms of municipal priorities and municipal objectives, but also in terms of the provincial objectives and provincial priorities. And Midtown is a good example where we've recently had site meetings with them where we demonstrate how, what they might be proposing for the Oakville GO station, as an example, fits into the broader Midtown transportation network, as well as the land use planning objectives for Midtown. But with respect to Kerr Street, past studies such as our transportation master plans and the Kerr Street EA have all demonstrated the importance of the grade separation for mobility and to address the growth, both for pedestrians, for cyclists, for cars, for local transit trips. And they're also a way to advance infrastructure projects that have been identified through that, in addition to the grade separation, but also the widening and improvements on Kerr to provide the additional capacity for cars, but also that active transportation infrastructure. But also the plans to electrify the Lakeshore West Rail Corridor and increase train service on that corridor also benefit from a grade separation. So we're trying to put the project into that context as well. It's not just about building a grade separation, it's about increasing mobility for all modes and achieving both local, regional, municipal objectives as well as those provincial objectives. And then finally, I just tie in the safety aspect. There's the benefit of a grade separation for all modes, again, pedestrians, cyclists, cars, local transit, rail traffic. There's a multi-level benefit to that grade separation, and so we're working to advance that avenue of this as well.
Yeah, thanks. I think we're all sold here on the importance of that separation for all the reasons you just outlined. I want to try and just draw out what you said because I think it's important. We did hear from residents and people last night and today who said, let's just wait until we've got the underpass before we start moving on this project. But from what I think I'm pulling out from you guys is it's going to get more pressure on the province to do this if we've got an OPA in place, so the province knows that this is happening and they must move on it. So I just wanted to be, open with what's going to get this project done quicker, sit back and wait and have nothing done, or show that we're moving forward and the province really needs to move ahead because there are some real implications here. So I appreciate the clarification on that. That's everything, Your Worship. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor O'Meara. Councillor Chisholm.
Well, this is an interesting situation. I guess I'm another opinion with respect to the underpass. My feeling is that no development happens till the underpass is completed. The pressure on the province is, through the municipality, but also with the owners and developers, or excuse me, the owners of the property. I really don't see the priority of the province of Metrolinx worried about a development happening, knowing full well it's not really impacting Metrolinx in such a way. So I am of the opinion it's the other way with respect to holding off on this until Metrolinx comes on board and we have this underpass developed. Just my opinion.
Thank you, Councillor. I wonder if I could offer you a thought to reconsider or enlarge your opinion. Staff have made quite a point of how they're not actually allowing any development until the underpass, they're not allowing any increase in traffic beyond what's there already by the phasing until the underpass is in place. And the province likes to see an official plan say that growth is going to be somewhere before they spend money on growth that the town hasn't authorized yet. So it could be one of these chicken and egg things where you got to pick your spot, and I just leave you with that thought and turn now to, and we can discuss it later in the discussion. I turn now to, well, I was going to turn to Councillor Giddings, but his hand disappeared. But I'm going to turn to you anyway, Councillor Giddings.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I appreciate that clarification in terms of being able to hold off until the underpass is completed. would that be similar to placing an H? I've never seen an H for transit, but similar effect?
Yes, as I understood it, and I'm not going to speak for him because he's here, that's what I understood Mr. Barrett to be saying they are proposing for us to adopt. Mr. Barrett, would you like to shine a brighter light on this?
Through you, Your Worship, there are phasing policies in the draft official plan amendment, and essentially they amount to 2.1 FSI being permitted before the underpass. And there's also policies regarding the town's use of holding provisions in a future zoning bylaw amendment through a phasing plan that would be submitted as part of future zoning bylaw amendment application. There's also transportation validation studies that are required. So through subsequent phases of this development, previous phases will be assessed, and the amount of people using transit, the amount of people walking, the vehicle trips, that will be measured and it will inform future phases of development. And that ensures that the results of future transportation studies are more accurate.
Thank you for that. And Mr. Mayor, this is probably for you then. With the changes in development charges and the requirement to spend them on a timely basis, the DCs that will be going towards the future underpass, any risk in that timing out or having concerns in that matter?
As I'm going to refer the question to the CAO, but my understand to correct or affirm me, but as I understand it, the requirement that you speak about, the 60%, may be met by allocating the money as opposed to spending it. So, CAO Closey, where's the province at on this allocation versus expenditure debate?
Through you, Mayor Burton, Bill 23 does have a clause within the bill that requires we spend or allocate. Our understanding of looking at that is that through our capital plan, our 10-year capital plan, we would have allocated a minimum of 60% of the development charges over that time period. So that's how that would be applied. What I don't know, and I'm sorry I don't have at my fingertips, is what portion of the, perhaps Jill does, what portion of the grade separation is actually development charge based, because some of it would not be.
Yeah, thank you for that. Further, so we identify it, we allocate it, but we don't know what the cost is going to be 4, 6, whatever number of years down the road, or the percentage contribution.
That's right. We had, and as you know, an arrangement with Metrolinx in terms of our share being capped. That agreement, once they've deferred the project indefinitely, that agreement is no longer applicable. So we will have to understand what those costs are going forward.
Which could be difficult, seen as not the overruns, but the increased costs that we've been facing for our various projects over the past year.
Yes, no, there's no doubt about it. Costing of any of their infrastructure projects has been much more than we've been expecting.
So our hope is that they'll accept a crystal ball, whether it be a little fuzzy or not, as long as we commit to the project.
And perhaps Nancy could help me. If we're referring to the 60%, it's what we currently forecast for the cost of those projects that we have captured within our development charges bylaw in the background study. So what the province is trying to do is ensure that of the money we're collecting in the development charge and intend to collect, that we're allocating that money to spend it. It's separate from the actual cost of the project at the end of the day. The point that I think that they're trying to get at is to ensure that we are actually allocating the dollars that we're collecting to be able to spend them. It doesn't relate to the cost of the project.
Further to that, Councillor, I think the public might be assisted in terms of understanding, the implications of what you were asking. The development charges bylaw is reviewed frequently, every few years, as you'll remember. And there's a debit and credit provision where, in the legislation, where when you go to the end of when you get to the end of the development charges bylaw, and remember, we have to strike a new one before the old one expires, there's a system of credits and debits. So where the project has cost more than we thought, we collect the excess in the next bylaw, and where the project has cost less than we thought, we credit the development charge payers with that benefit. So we literally never get to take money for no good purpose. But the bigger point here is that the tool remains, and it would be unfortunate if people thought that the development charges changes were going to prevent us from charging for it. Now, there's the other angle is in all development charges, there's a benefit to existing discount. And, that's been there since 1997. And thanks to Councillor Elgar's leadership on this, we've been pointing this out for at least the 16 years that I've been here. So I think we all know about that piece of the puzzle. So I hope that helps people understand the point we're chasing here. Councillor Giddings, are you finished? Councillor Haslett-Thiel.
Thank you, Mayor Burton. Could staff just clarify for me, so the density in this area, what I've heard you say is that it's across the entire of Kerr, or the Kerr Street Village Growth Area. Once this OP is passed, what is the risk to the public of increased heights being allocated?
Through you, Your Worship, this is a site-specific development application, so the plan itself just applies to the comprehensive development plan area and the increase in height and density.
So just, I want to be crystal clear for the folks that have really clearly articulated the other night concern about the intensity of this development. So this is the height that they could anticipate when the applications come in, and that we have a defensible position that it wouldn't be any higher.
Through you, Your Worship, the heights in the official plan amendment provide for a maximum height. So when a zoning bylaw amendment comes in, it wouldn't be above the heights shown in the comprehensive development plan.
And should one of the applicants decide to take this to the land tribunal, does that become an open discussion?
Through you, Your Worship, if this application is appealed to the Ontario Land Tribunal, the tribunal would make a decision on it, and it's possible that they could make adjustments to the heights.
Okay. Thank you for that. I'm just going to shift gears a bit. In the OPA amendment, there's a section that talks about the railway, and that's the 30-meter setback from the railway. And there's language in there that would allow parking areas or structures. It also does reference that it could be parks and open space. What can we do to ensure that it is parks and open space and or community gardens and or a dog park, given the lack of green space in this area?
So through you, Your Worship, the current official plan amendment, it does encourage rooftop amenity space, private rooftop amenity space, for example, on the decks of podiums, on the tops of parking garages, and also amenity space within that 30-meter setback from the rail corridor. So through future zoning bylaw amendment applications, we'll get to see and plan in more detail for those areas.
So there, So the option to amend that section to eliminate any option to surface parking, I have to leave it to the opportunity for future discussions. Because this is a community that will not have what a lot of others have. And the community gardens, as you will, it should be a given that we are trying, desperately to hold on to green space, particularly when I look at the urban strategies pictures for clarity for the public. Hogsback Park is not really a green space that people are going to play in. I think somebody said to me, if I'm a mountain goat, I would have fun, but not everybody. So I ask, and hopefully the applicants here, it is so critical that we don't forget that livability is really about more than just having four walls and flushing water and sanitary. It is about green space.
Anything else, Councillor? Thank you very much. Councillor Elgar?
Thank you. Through Mayor Burton to staff. I know in our report coming up with Bill 23, staff's wording is Bill 23 as proposed would result in a significant reduction in the amount the town can collect for redevelopment to pay for the growth-related land and infrastructure to maintain service levels, thereby increasing the cost of growth to the town substantially. This project that we're talking about, this OPA, does Ms. Sully or anybody have any information they could provide to us to show us the impact this could have on the residents of Oakville related to development charges which are changing in Bill 23?
Through you, Mayor Burton, it's premature to know what the impact of Bill 23 will have on the town's finances, and in particular how it would impact this development. Some of the, as you'll learn in the presentation, some of the regulations aren't out yet. We don't even know the full impact. We're not sure how we'll be made whole. We will be coming back to council in the new year with some of the impacts and the considerations that are going to need to be made to ensure that we can fund growth going forward, and strategies on how we might deal with that. But at this time, we don't have enough information to know the impact.
So that could be part of the ballpark number you put in of 79 million to 237 million. That would be, something like that would be in here also?
So those are the potential impacts based on what we know right now with the land. If the land is all exempt, we know that we're losing money for the deferrals. All of those things will affect our cash flows and our ability to fund growth projects. We don't know yet whether we'll have to reduce the charge for some of those things or whether it's in the next bylaw. There's a whole lot of unknowns that we're still working through.
We do know that we're going to have to discount by 20% in the first year and then 15.
Absolutely, that's $34 million over the next 4 years. That's already happening.
That's reality.
That's real. Yeah.
Great. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Councillor Elgar. I guess I do have a question for staff. I wonder if the Director of Planning could speak to the nature of the process a little more. It's been made clear that this is, I'll say, only an official plan amendment, that everything in it is illustrative only except for the policies, and that it awaits zoning amendments, zoning applications and development applications and site plans and many other steps before we get to fine details. But in the discussion about a hypothetical deferral to facilitate conversations among the landowners, it began to appear to me that that notion of a deferral so that they can negotiate with each other appears to be based on the idea that this is a matter, that what happens to 171 is a matter between are among the landowners. And I don't see it that way. I think we're the land use planning authority, and what happens to 171 is between 171 and council and our planners and the laws and the regulations that descend upon us from the province. We're the decider, not 550 and their partners. And it was brought out in the discussion that the letter from Ms. Anderson asking for greater density did not provide the, well, A, wasn't an application for an official plan amendment, and the implication was that it should have been, to be proper, that it's our decision, not the other folks, as I said a second ago, and that the appropriate supporting studies didn't accompany the request that surely would have had to accompany an application for an official plan amendment. So, if you start from the premise I'm starting from, which is we're the authority and we make the decision, not the other landowners, it seems to me that by adopting and not deferring the staff's proposal, we kind of force 171 to operate properly and bring an official plan amendment application for what they want and the necessary supporting studies to justify it, and submit to the test of that we enforce through our official plan and through the many layers of provincial legislation and regulations that sit above us. And I also heard from Mr. Barrett that it would be it would need more than a 6-month delay. It would be 6 months plus the time it took to prepare those studies. And so to turn this into a question, I'm going to turn to the director and ask him do I have that right?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I don't know if there's anything else I can elaborate on that. I think you hit it more eloquently than I could muster. You're quite right. There will be a process for this, and I think to expand upon the question from Councillor Haslett-Field, there will be subsequent processes that we will have to bring back to Council through a zoning process to look at how this OPA would be implemented on the site, and that's regardless of whichever property we're talking about, including 171. To look at additional height and density on 171, there has to be that due public process, and that would mean bringing it back to council in some way and allowing the public to be able to provide some commentary on that as well. Subsequent to that, depending on the tenure of the proposal, whether it's rental or condo, council sees those draft plans of condominium. We post site plans on our website, so there are other opportunities for others to weigh in. In terms of it going to the tribunal, should that happen, although yes, the tribunal can impose, there needs to be still the rationale behind the imposition of additional height or density, and I think that is something that we would have to look into if we ever get to that point.
Well, thank you. That helped me. I hope it was helpful to everyone else. Council, I think it's time to make a decision. Who wants to move a motion? I'm looking at the ward councillors first. Councillor O'Meara, your hand is up though. And Councillor Grant, let's see what we have from outside Ward 2. Councillor O'Meara.
Well, thank you, Your Worship. Again, I'm happy to make a motion, but I just want to, if the Ward 2 councillors want to make their motion, then I'll defer. Otherwise, I will move the recommendation as is before us.
Councillor, I was having trouble hearing you. You're moving the staff recommendation.
I am, yes.
Thank you. That's in order. Councillor Grant, you're next.
And I'm sorry, but I may have missed the point of what we just last discussed. Are we talking about the fact that we are telling a private property owner what they have to do with their property? And if we start doing that, are we going down a slippery slope? Am I wrong? Did I miss something?
Well, I would never call anybody wrong. That would be undiplomatic. But I would say that private property owners apply to us for permission to do things on their property. And we have an application, we have the start of that process here with this official plan amendment application. So that's the refinement I would give you on your submission. So the normal process in Ontario and in our municipalities is people apply for permission to do things and we grant it or not.
Right, and what I've known of the property at 171 Spears is that they did not want to sell their property or change their property. And what I'm hearing tonight is that we are telling them they may need to.
No, as I understand it, the representations from 171 are that they wish to develop, and they believe that they should negotiate with the other landowners to get their permissions. They want, they want more than is in this comprehensive official plan amendment. And what planning staff have, I think, made clear is they have an avenue to get it. It's called an application for official plan amendment, and they should make such an application.
Very well. I won't push this any further. I want to get to the Bill 23 agenda. So thank you very much.
You're welcome. Thank you. Councillor Chisholm.
Thank you, Worship. I'm not in support of the motion with respect to approving the report. It's quite obvious from our residents and our constituents, they want to have a little bit more time to look at this because it is a major development in our ward, and probably the biggest development in our ward, and probably in the future and in history. The concern we have, it is an area of a catchment area that is very sensitive with respect to the economics of that area, and have the importance of our friends, our families that live there that have affordable housing. And we are being challenged and stressed in this area with respect to that type of housing that hopefully in these developments will happen. But right now, we have existing issues, with other developments happening on Spears Road. As everyone knows, the council of 50 Spears Road is under evaluation of taking down a 4-story and looking at a higher a complex on Spears Road. So, and the difficulty is the people that live in there are on fixed incomes, have lived there for many years, and now it's a total upheaval for the emotions and the psychic of our residents in these areas. The commercial is very, very important to us with this area. I have sensitivities with respect to the transportation studies. I'm of the opinion that development shouldn't happen there until the underpass is done. The province or Metrolinx has pulled from that project, and we need to get them back on the table as soon as possible. Staff have suggested that the first phase can be accommodated in concert with Metrolinx in some shape or form. I'm not of the strong opinion of that, knowing that I live in the area and understand the traffic conditions we have already existing on that intersection. So there's a lot of moving parts to this development, and I can appreciate and I applaud staff for the detailed, comprehensive report that they put forward. It makes a lot of sense, but on the other end, I have real concerns that the residents and our community are not ready for this, and the future to look at this in a little bit more comprehensive. I agree with Mr. Johnson's comments about what's the rush. Can we not go back and defer this for a little bit further consultation and review? Because there are moving parts to this, and it is a big development, and I've always said it's new going on existing, and we also have to take in consideration of the rights of our existing residents. They live there, they breathe there, they work there, they shop there, and this is something for them that it has to be palatable in the future for everyone. And right now, I'm not sure there's a confidence level with respect to our residents on this development at this point in time. So I'm not in support of the motion, Your Worship.
Thank you, Councillor Chisholm. Councillor Duddick?
Thank you, Your Worship. And thank you, Councillor O'Meara, for getting the ball rolling. I know it's difficult, and I appreciate the gesture. I guess I'm really wrestling with this one because part of me wants to say, try to be optimistic in terms of the province with the underpass. I'm satisfied that the agreement between the private landowners is just that, it's private. It's not for us to dictate, you should speak to so-and-so and you should speak to so-and-so. They've provided a comprehensive plan, our staff are pleased with it. Where I have a problem is the underpass. I cannot in good conscience approve this knowing that everything hinges on that underpass. And quite honestly, and I regret having saying this, but I don't have much faith in the province. Don't have much faith in Metrolinx. I will never forget that meeting we had where representatives came and delegated in front of our council. And they were blown away by the fact we said, you have such a poor reputation in our town. And they sort of went away like, whoa, first time I ever heard of this. I mean, you've got Burlow that's going forward. I'm very pleased for them. That's without building. Now you're talking about doing all these buildings in an area without providing the underpass. So I cannot support it going forward. I really appreciate staff's efforts in regards to this report. They've gone over and above to accommodate what has been a very difficult process, especially given it's sort of like trying to hold mercury in your hand. You can't contain it. It's no wonder it's taken us to this point in time to actually get the various landowners to actually discuss something versus one say yes and the other say no. So like my ward colleague, I cannot support it going forward.
Thank you, Councillor Dudek. Councillor Elgar.
Thank you. Through you, Mayor Burton. To try to get this thing moving along, like we talked earlier about a holding provision that we could as a council put on it. That to me, and whether it's kind of like you used the term belts and suspenders. Is that possible? Could staff, would they agree that that might help us out if we do approve this with the holding provision regarding the underpass?
They've put that in. If you vote for this, that's what you're voting for.
So that's what I heard, but it sounds like, just based on Councillor Dudek, who is much closer to it, she's okay with a lot of it, except that it's about the underpass.
I would answer that this comes down to you either believe that, one belief is that if we don't put in our official plan that there's going to be growth here, right? If we say no to this, that Metrolinx will build the underpass to make us want to put growth there. And what we've heard from others is that Metrolinx's position is, until we see it in your official plan, why would we spend the money to build it? So that if you, and we heard from Director Stephen, that if you want to incentivize Metrolinx to get the, to get it done, as a certain popular politician likes to say, and I'm not talking about you, I'm talking about the big guy. If you want to get it done, you've got to give, Director Stephen told us, Metrolinx said, we want to see, past this, and then that'll raise the priority. So it's a question of how do you set a priority? And I thank you for the question, because it allows us to bring out that the whole point of this phasing is that it allows these holds to prevent any development until the underpass is built. And that's why I find it possible to support this.
Okay, so you're saying, but also staff have said that too, so it's in there. So I will support the motion put forward by Sean.
All right, thank you, Councillor Elgar. Councillor Nanda.
Yes, Mr. Mayor. My question was towards the clarification on the Kerr Street underpass as well, since that seems to be a big point towards doing this. So we have clarification then, I guess, that will need to be put in there and built at some point?
Yes, Councillor, that's what we just covered, yeah. Counselor Dudek.
Thank you, Your Worship. Don't want to beat this to death, but I just have to rise when I hear priority being raised in the context of the discussion. This is, I believe, and I might be mistaken, the 4th rated in priority of safety for Metrolinx. In other words, the public safety is at risk. If that's not a priority for Metrolinx and they need us to provide something in an official plan to get them to act in the best interests of the public, then it's a sorry day is all I can say.
Thank you, Counselor Dudek. Council, shall I put the vote? All those in favor of the, Counselor Chisholm?
Your Worship, can we have a recorded vote, please?
Yes, we could certainly do that. Madam Clerk, a recorded vote has been requested. Would you please conduct a recorded vote? To vote yes, you say the word yes. To vote no, you say the word no. We don't use aye, nay, or any other thing. And I thank Chair Carr for the lesson and the importance of this. Madam Clerk.
Counselor O'Meara,
Yes.
Counselor McNeese,
No.
Counselor Dudek,
No.
Counselor Chisholm,
No.
Counselor Giddings,
Yes.
Counselor Haslett Theo,
No.
Counselor Elgar,
Yes.
Counselor Longo,
Yes.
Mayor Burton,
Yes.
Counselor Knoll has a conflict, Counselor Grant,
No.
Counselor Adams,
Yes?
Counselor Nanda,
No.
Counselor Shi.
No.
Well, that means the motion fails and the application or the recommendation by staff has been turned down. Can we turn now to the next item? See where we get with that. All right.
To let staff know what to do. Is somebody?
A point of order, Your Worship, would there not be an opportunity to consider deferral rather than just a complete shutdown?
Deferral is in the parliamentary procedure, deferral is what you move before you vote on whether to
Point well taken.
accept it or not. And a deferral motion is in order before the vote. After Councilor O'Meara moved the motion, a deferral motion would have been in order. Well, what you've achieved is a permanent deferral until somebody comes back with comes back with it. But, I hear your desire for a deferral, and we're a flexible bunch here. Why don't we entertain a motion, perhaps from you, Councilor Chisholm, that the item be now referred, rather than deferred, to staff to address the comments and concerns received from council and the public. Is everybody happy with that? Is staff happy with that?
I'm fine with that, Your Worship, but I think as part of that, I'm not trying to make an amendment or put words in your mouth, but it's not also to indicate a further public engagement in some process, in this process, because I think that was one of the biggest concerns. There wasn't enough through talking to the residents, and so there wasn't enough of that dialogue or engagement. Can we have that?
It's required.
Yeah. Oh, because it's going to be a statutory?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Do we need a recorded vote on this one? Is there any objection to this motion?
Mr. Mayor,
Councilor Giddings.
Sorry about that. Would this require reconsideration?
I know, I'm trying to find you a way to not have to do all of that by saying, well, you've got this item you rejected. What do you want to do with it now? Refer it to staff to consider all of the comments received from council and the public and bring it back when they've got something that'll, you know, address those things. And but yeah, you could also reconsider it if you don't want to refer the matter. I mean, I think, you know, you have your choice there. They'll both get you to the same place. What would you like to do?
As the chair often says, I'm in your hands.
Well, that leads to an interesting illustration. Well, I saw no objection to the referral motion. Is everybody happy with that?
Sorry.
I did, yes. Councilor O'Meara.
I'm sorry, Your Worship. This council just voted no on this, so I'm not sure how we're going and referring something that we just denied. So I'm not in favor of referring back. This council just made a decision, and that decision is what this council made. So this council needs to live with that decision.
All
The
right.
applicant can do what they want after, but that's my
Okay.
position.
All right, I get you. Councilor Giddings is moving reconsideration. This is not subject to debate, and it has nothing to do with the argument about what we're going to do with it next, but that's where we're at. Is there any objection to reconsideration? Well, there being no objection, it passes the 2/3 majority requirement, Councilor O'Meara, and we can now reconsider the matter. Councilor O'Meara's motion is on the table to be reconsidered. And anybody who wants to, before I call the vote, can move deferral. Councilor Chisholm.
The motion is we're looking at deferral. Is that correct?
No.
Can I ask for a deferral?
If you want a deferral, this is the only time.
Thank you.
The
I'm
last
asking for
time you
deferral, Your
can do
Worship.
it.
Thank you.
Okay, so it's deferral. Now, Councilor Chisholm, do you want any conditions on your deferral? Do you want a time span on your deferral? You don't have to, but I ask in case you do.
I will leave that, direct that through Your Worship to the staff with respect to the timing on it.
All right. Then, can I ask, Councilor, if you would like your motion to read that council defers the item until staff can bring back a revised proposal that would address the comments received from council and the public.
And add in the first quarter of 2023?
Well, if you remember, this is going to take 6 to 9 months. I would say you're looking at 9 months, just based on what I've seen over the last 16 years. So I wouldn't set the time. I would just set what you want to see when it comes back.
That's fine, Your Worship. I'm with that.
All right, so I think we have agreement on the deferral motion. Is there any objection to the deferral motion? Madam Clerk, there being none, we've made a decision. What?
Oh, Councilor Grant is.
Oh, okay. Well, Mr. Grant, Councilor Grant.
Thank you. With the deferral, I would like us to defer until the developer has a full conversation with all landowners. And that may be more than 6 or 9 months or whatever it takes, but it's getting ridiculous that we're considering a motion or development where they're considering FSI that doesn't actually consider the fact that they're dealing with a property owner that doesn't want to sell the land to them yet. So I would like to, I agree with the deferral, but I'd like to defer until we have some kind of commitment from all the property owners that they want to be part of this development.
Councilor, I don't think we have the authority to make a requirement like that. And the way we worded the motion, it's certainly permitted. And you know, the various landowners all have the right to bring separate applications. Staff and council will be the ones who determine whether those a future proposal or proposals fit what we want and abide with the rules and regulations that we enforce. So I think you should be happy already.
I am very happy with deferral. Thank you. Okay, let's go.
All right, thank you, Councillor. Councillor Duddick?
Your worship, I was just going to add that it has been clearly articulated in terms of staff's requirements to even consider what is being proposed by the owner 171, that they have to provide various studies and backgrounds. So that deferral will very well incorporate that. So just want to give us reassurance.
Yeah, it'll have to, because, the neighboring landowners are not the deciding body, we are. All righty, I think we're moving on, I hope we are, to 7.2. And at the rate we're going, I wonder, did everybody bring us jammies? All right. Okay, so Bill 23, a contentious matter, passed by the legislature, given royal assent, and it's the law of the land that we actually have to uphold. And the Chief Administrative Officer would like to kick off the discussion and the information from staff and presentations with a few select words of her own. I urge everybody to pay close attention to what Ms. Closey says. She's got a lot of experience and in a wide variety of roles and places. And over the time that she's been working for the town, I have come to know that she knows what she's talking about. So please, heed her. Madam Closey.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. The purpose of the report in front of you today on Bill 23 is to provide you first with information on what the bill is about, which is quite extensive, and to anticipate the impacts to the town as a result of the bill, and to provide you with the next steps that the town needs to consider in moving forward. The province has stated they need 1.5 million homes over the next 10 years. And many agree, including town staff, with the magnitude of this target. As I indicated in the memo that I had circulated on Monday, we have at best been able to achieve just under half those number of units in any 10-year period. To double the output in the number of homes will require a dramatic change in the way in which we manage and deliver housing in this province. Bill 23 is currently in force. It is now law, does pose a threat to the town's finances. There is no doubt about that. The delivery of infrastructure and the ability for us to provide climate resilient, complete communities is a challenge. However, when you consider what we have heard over the last several weeks, there still is much to learn and understand from our partners on how the changes are actually going to be implemented and how funding gaps may be addressed. And I'll give you some examples. It is unclear how the federal government is going to address programs. We know that there is a housing accelerator fund that is coming. They have consulted on it, but it will not be out until early 2023. They've also been consulting on a permanent transit funding for municipalities, and both of these programs could actually help and ease our municipal finance obligations, as well as assist in providing for those complete communities. Regarding the province, they've only just started to implement the Housing Affordability Task Force recommendations. We've just seen a few bills in relation to that. And there has been, over the last several weeks, an indication from the province that they are willing to ensure that municipalities are made whole. How they're going to do this, they have not indicated, but that is what they have said. So in short, Bill 23 is now law. And much of it is still unknown as to how we will actually go forward collectively and address the housing crisis. You will note that the staff have specifically not provided council with a recommendation reacting to the legislation. We focused on what it is and what is its impacts and what we as a town need to do. How we react to the legislation we felt was a decision that council needs to make. You may decide to follow some of your municipal counterparts who have taken a very strong line against the legislation and the changes that are in Bill 30, whatever the number is, 23. And that's calling for the pulling back of the legislation or revoking it. While this position does actually reflect and recognize the significance of the impact of this legislation to the municipalities, it does not recognize that we play an active role in the housing solution and that the status quo is not a realistic option for all of us to go forward. Likewise, if the town fully supports Bill 23, we do then acknowledge the importance that we play in increasing the housing supply. But it does not address the very real financial impacts these challenges or changes will have on our residents and the tough decisions that will be required of council as a result of this bill being in place. The advice that staff that we can provide you in thinking of the comments that you will provide to the province, we feel that there should be 4 elements part of that. One is we do need to acknowledge that a change is required in the delivery of housing in this province if we're to achieve the 1.5 million homes within the 10 years. We do need to understand that we have a role in that process and we assist in the delivery of that housing. So we are part of the solution. The comments also do need to recognize that if Bill 23 is unmitigated and no solutions to address the funding issues are not brought forward, that it is placing an undue burden on municipal finances. And most importantly, it needs to call to action that we have to work together, each level of government, federal, provincial, regional, local, as well as the building community, to make sure that we come up with mutually supportive actions in order to move forward with the housing crisis. So with those brief remarks, I now turn the presentation over to Kirk Bigger, our Manager of Policy Planning and Heritage, and he can set out for you what the actual bill says and what are the implications to the town, and a brief discussion on next steps. I will say that next steps are something that we will have to look at over the next year, because the changes that are coming, not only in Bill 23, but we now have Bill 39, and I'm sure others in terms of what are the implications to the town. So, Kurt?
Thank you, CEO Clohessy, for those remarks, and good evening, good afternoon, Council. Through you, Mayor Burton, this presentation is not intended to go into great depth of the legislation. I think the report begins to address that, as does the appendix. What the province has proposed, to a certain extent what's already in effect. There's still a lot to come, and that will be the subject of many meetings to follow this meeting, and to really get into the details once we know more on the implications and as the regulations are released and as we can evaluate our current state of the union with the future, how we change in order to accommodate these changes. I will also say, as a bit of a compliment to the team that pulled this report together, I'm the one that gets to make the presentation, but there were at least a dozen contributors to it, and every staff person and members of departments really focused in on their specific areas, and that is what came together in this report. And so there may be questions there likely will be questions that I'm not suited to answer, and we can draw in members of the team to help this evening and again as we go forward in this process. So I'm grateful to be part of this team, and we've had a interesting time pulling it all together for you, and I hope we can have an interesting discussion to follow. As I mentioned, I'm not going to try and spend a lot of time on the slides because I think what we want to get to is a discussion. So just quick background, October 25th of this year, the province released their Phase 3 of their housing program, More Homes Built Faster, the Housing Supply Action Plan, and that's to follow through on their 1.5 million new homes over the next 10 years across the province. Bill 23, which is the topic tonight, the More Homes Built Faster Act is a key component of this action plan. It proposes to amend and has already in effect amended various statutes that deal with the business of housing development, the Planning Act, the Development Charges Act, Conservation Authorities Act, the Ontario Land Tribunal Act, and the Ontario Heritage Act, to name a few, along with a number of regulations and other bulletins and those types of matters. On November 22nd, so just about a month after introducing the bill, it was given royal assent, which means it's passed into law. Not all of the provisions in the changes proposed are in effect. There are still some to come, and that's why we're still trying to evaluate what those implications are and what it means to Oakville. These are some highlights of comments from the report. Again, the report goes into greater detail, and some of it might be a bit repetitive, but I think it's important to review some of these points. The scope of the proposed changes is broad, and the potential implications to the town are extensive. It's fair to say we are aligned with the intent of the legislation, which is fundamentally to produce more housing, and we are continuing to comment through the province's process through the Environmental Registry and the Ontario Regulatory Registry, which is where these proposals are posted by the province for comment. And there are still some commenting windows available to us that may, in fact, help to shape future regulations. And this is cooperative spirit that we're trying to foster here in our work and also with other partners and agencies. Again, to just say it's a dynamic and evolving situation, and not all the parts have been revealed or been released, and we anticipate there will still be some substantial proposals coming our way. One example, again, the details of changes to the provincial policy statement and the growth plan. We haven't seen those details. That would be potentially a very significant piece of legislation or change that we'd have to deal with here as well. Further highlights, again, as mentioned, the intent is well intended, the legislation, but we have some concerns, and those are expressed throughout the report. I've tried to summarize some of the key ones here. Again, not to get into all of them or to list all of them, but the transferring of planning and environmental responsibility to the town is a concern. Identifying cultural heritage properties for immediate designation, according to some of the changes in the Ontario Heritage Act, is a major concern for Oakville. Funding shortfalls, a top line concern. Adequate provision of land for parks and public recreation, and this connects to climate change policy, and it connects to complete communities and the types of the type of town that we want to continue to grow and develop here. At a more micro scale, perhaps, or neighborhood scale, ensuring quality development, in some cases without site plan control. And all of these concerns are summed up into staff and resource and decision-making implications as well. So as CO Clohessy mentioned, some tough decisions for this community and for this council and for staff and for the corporation coming our way. On the topic of transferring responsibility, the legislation reads, again, not in effect, but proposed still, and to be determined or to be further understood at a later date. What it means for the Region of Halton and Conservation Authority's responsibilities in land use planning and regulation around land use decision-making as well, being I guess, under the auspices of streamlining and cutting out red tape in order to deliver housing approvals more quickly. That's going to present challenges to this municipality in terms of our ability to provide technical expertise and to review these development applications as they come to us. Whereas in the past, we relied on relationship and shared responsibility with our partner agencies. Some of those responsibilities will be coming to us. So that's going to be a challenge. Again, still not fully understood, but something that's obviously on the radar. Difficulties in recovering costs for growth-related infrastructure and services. So that topic came up in the previous item, and it's one that I know it's very important consideration for council. How do we have growth pay for growth? How do we provide for infrastructure in a timely fashion? How do we develop climate resilient communities, and how do we develop complete communities, safe communities, healthy communities? And finally, well, it's back to the infrastructure, coordinating as the region, for example, would have been the infrastructure provider. How does that look now with the changing responsibilities for the region coming to the town? Some of those aspects and linking up growth and support for growth with the timely delivery of infrastructure. A couple more streamlining measures include changes to the Ontario Land Tribunal to prioritize cases that create the most housing. So there's been a process of appeals and dealing with certain matters before the tribunal, and that process is proposed to be changed to accelerate housing, and that may be at the expense of opportunities to participate in that process. Again, back to the micro level, exemptions for residential development of less than 10 units from site plan. And our initial assessment is stormwater management and tree canopy impacts might be affected through these measures. And that's about flooding, and that's about heat islands, and that's about, again, safe, healthy, complete communities. And all of these changes add up over the space of a municipality, perhaps, to have broader impacts. Again, still trying to understand what those mean, but that these little pieces are part of a larger picture. And so just to talk about transferring responsibility, the impact of the town and our ability to deliver climate resilient and complete communities may be affected, and also the province's own interest in providing for the orderly development of safe and healthy communities. That's right out of the Planning Act. That may also be impacted. I think we would all agree that that's not the path we'd like to go down as a province. On the financial side, and this is where if questions come later, there will be colleagues to help support any questions. But just again, from our initial assessment, again, more details to come, but some of the exemptions and the phasing in and the caps on development charges and our ability to collect those in order to finance infrastructure and growth, those impacts might range from 12 to 30% decrease in revenue. And that's, so the number here, 79 to 237 million. Again, some details yet to come. On the parkland side, again, another major interest for the town of Oakville and our community. Just within our strategic growth areas, so that's just a part of the area where we try and secure parkland, and these are areas of change, great change. A high-level estimate is that we would be losing 60 to 70% of the land, our ability to collect land within these areas, and that translates into $65 to $75 million of the 100. So our parkland dedication bylaw has determined that $109 million worth of parkland is required in the strategic growth areas. And again, to pick up on a comment made earlier by CO Cloissy, we're continuing to examine the ways to implement these changes so that the financial impacts are not felt at the local level. So there are some comments in circulation, and there's perhaps some measures on the horizon that will keep the municipality whole, and that is certainly of great interest and great concern for the town of Oakville. On the topic of the housing target, again, this is we think we have an idea of what it means, but we're still trying to get to figure that out because there's a couple different ways, and we've had a couple different views expressed around what it means. But essentially, the province has assigned a housing target of 33,000 units by 2031. And there's different ways of measuring it, and these are some preliminary numbers, but let's just say, for example, the last 10 years, we've been approving approximately 2,000 units per year. And that's been as low as 700, and it's been as high as 2,900. So there's quite a range in there, and it's actually been increasing. We also have, and the report talks about units in the pipeline. We actually have more than what has been calculated or presented in the report. So we have a substantial pipeline of units to be approved that are under review, but to implement the target, and we will be required to produce a pledge, which is the steps to meet the target. What's our strategy? We're going to have to double or triple our rate of approving units in order to meet that target by 2031. We do have a well-defined urban structure. Again, strategic growth areas, nodes and corridors, the places for transit-supported development to come, and high-order transit, public mass transit. So that urban structure is positioned to accommodate a substantial amount of that growth, but we know that we may need to look at, we don't know exactly how much can be accommodated. It can take a lot, and we'll figure out how much, where and when. The pressure will, again, create an issue around timely delivery of infrastructure and again, achieving complete communities to support this growth. There are other measures that provide for gentle intensification or gentle density, and those are outside of our urban structure. Those will obviously contribute to meeting the housing target. Again, right now, it's really just assumptions and trying to look at what that might add up to. So that's another area that we'll be considering and working with council to implement. On the natural heritage side, again, some pretty substantial changes proposed to the role of conservation authorities. As I mentioned previously, we rely on the CAs, and in Oakville we have 2 authorities, mainly Conservation Halton, but a little bit of Credit Valley. And we collaborate and we rely on those agencies to provide environmental services to the town in development review, and they also have a regulatory function. So there's some dramatic changes to their role coming, and how is that role going to be continued to be met or served locally through the town is a big concern, a big question mark at this time. Some of the things that conservation authorities are responsible for, they examine risks to the public and impacts to the health of natural heritage systems, ecology, habitat, endangered species, stormwater management, floodplains, natural hazards. Those are very important considerations and require very highly skilled, trained professionals. And currently, the town doesn't have all of those professionals on staff. So that's where we talk about resourcing and concerns about how to meet these requirements. That's a staffing issue, it's a resourcing issue to work out for the future. And then so just to summarize, really, Bill 23 would result in a reduction in this partnership, and then the town likely responsible for, as it's positioned now, we'd be responsible for administering those responsibilities. Cultural heritage implication, and thank you for your patience. We're almost through. Again, some Ontario Heritage Act proposals that have yet to come into effect, but one of the big ones is the proposed changes such as a 2-year time limit for properties to remain on our municipal heritage register. So essentially we put properties on the register as properties of heritage interest, and they're protected under certain they're protected from certain types of development through that, and it gives us a time and a process in order to address the property owner's desires for change. What the proposals are saying is that we would have a 2-year time limit. So if a listed property is not designated within 2 years, then it comes off the list, which means it's not protected by the Ontario Heritage Act any further. And so we see that as a high-risk condition for losing cultural heritage, and just knowing how Oakville and Heritage have a long history together, this is a very important consideration for the town and this council, and this heritage would be irreplaceable. So that's a major concern. Just to kind of highlight, so the report gets into it a little bit. So let's say our list has about 300 properties on it.
And that, properties could be a building, it could be a collection of buildings, it could be a portion of a landscape. So it could be a fence or that sort of thing. So heritage attributes, heritage features on 300 properties. And we have currently a researcher that's pursuing designation research. So in order to bring forward a designation bylaw, you need to have the history of the property and all the attributes sorted out. That individual will be in a one-year contract able to do about 20 properties. And so here we have 100 to 300, depending on how you sort the list, that we would need to be addressing within 2 years. And so that obviously is of great concern and resourcing and impacts to our heritage work program. And the final note on litigation, not all landowners would be willing to be designated, and so there's an appeal process, and then you're off to the tribunal to try and resolve those matters. Some are willing, and those go through a little more easily. So it just sort of ripples or compounds out from here. So just wrapping up, next steps in conclusion. As mentioned, and as we're all beginning to realize, Bill 23 will have a significant impact on the town's financial position, the ability to deliver required infrastructure, and the opportunity to create climate-resilient, complete communities. Staff continues to review the broader implications and what changes and updates will be needed to the town's responsibilities, processes, and procedures. And staff will be providing a substantive, fact-based positions for council's consideration over the next year regarding the town's next steps, including the parkland strategy, master plans, development charges, community benefits, and other programs and policies that we will be considering. So this is a recommendation in the report for council's consideration, and I'll wrap up my presentation there, and I'd be happy to try answering your questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Bigger. Councillor Adams and Councillor Chisholm are first off the bat.
Thanks very much, and thank you for the overview presentation and the report. There's no question that the financial implications of Bill 23 are going to be dramatic for municipalities if they're not mitigated. There's a big range in the DC impact in the report. Can staff provide any kind of background as to what I think the Parkland one is kind of self-explanatory, but the DC one has a big range. Can staff give an indication as to what happens at the bottom range versus the top range? And what things could we be working on to try to mitigate that?
Thank you, through you, Mr. Mayor. The range is really based on what land may be excluded or ineligible from funding through DCs. So when we look at Bill 23, we know that they've discounted the DCs, that's $34 million. They have indicated that they're going to create a regulatory body to determine what land will be exempt. We don't know yet what land that will be, so the higher number assumes all land for roads, parks, etc., is exempt. So that's how we get to that $237 million and the range between the two. The smaller number is if they just exempted some parkland, like for community centers, things like that, underneath the facility. Because we don't know, we put that range there. There will also be exemptions for attainable or affordable housing. We haven't calculated that because we don't know the impact. We don't have the definition yet, and we don't know what the uptake will be on that. So that's why there's such a range.
Excellent. Thank you very much for that information. That brings me to the second question, which is there's a bunch of regulations and other details that need to be worked out by the province, and we don't have that. The province hasn't given them out yet. Do we have an understanding of what the timing of that would be, and what are the points of influence that we have for those?
Through you, Mayor Burton, no, I don't have an indication of the timing. I don't. I would assume it will be fairly quick, but I don't know.
I understand that there are, so outside of the world of the financial impacts, there are other regulations that dictate various things that I understood come into play January 1st for some of the other pieces, that perhaps the non-financial pieces. Do we have a listing of all of those timings and who gets to approve the regulations for each of these things? Are they all the Minister of Municipal Affairs and Housing? Or is it's a range of other ministries, I think?
I'm wondering if Nadia's, I'm not sure, oh, right.
There she is.
Through you, Mayor Burton, to Councillor Adams, there is I have a summary of the various pieces of the legislation that have been proclaimed and are in force. The majority is in effect as of November 28th, as you know, and some parts, as you've indicated, they are going to come into effect on January 1st. Those are pieces of the legislation, not regulations that we haven't seen yet. So there is still a number of pieces that are coming through regulation that we have not seen, and I do not have any information from the province on the timing of the regulations that are still to come.
Is there a list of all of the related regulations?
No, I haven't seen a list of all of the related regulations. There's indications in the legislation of things that are to be prescribed by regulation, so we have an idea of things that are coming, such as criteria for POPs, privately owned parks.
Right.
So there's indications in the legislation of what will be prescribed by regulation.
So there's a whole layer of complexity that falls underneath Bill 23 that's, I'll describe it as a little bit opaque to us because while Bill 23 is passed, there's a bunch of other stuff that some of which is enacted already and some of which we have to wait for, basically.
That's fair, yes.
Thank you very much.
All right, Councillor Adams, thank you for that. I assume you're done, and we'll turn to Councillor Chisholm.
Thank you, Your Worship. Through you to staff, probably or CAO Jane Closely can help me out with this one. With all the devil's in the details and where we're going with this and the fear of the unknown and the challenges we're going to have we started looking at establishing a framework of corporate communications and how we're going to deliver the message to our residents, the high level stuff that, that we'll be doing in the process, because at the end of the day, when that tax bill goes out and if it's up dramatically, who they're going to be hitting on, it'll be the municipalities. So just anticipation of some type of framework with corporate communications bring us through this whole process and the high level messages to the public. Is that on the agenda?
Through you, Mr. Mayor. It is not at this point in time because it was essential that we heard what council's positioning or reaction to the legislation was as a result of this meeting. So as a result of this, then we will begin to carry out that communication. We are, though, monitoring, for example, on the financial side, the dollars that we are already starting to lose. So at least we will have a clear accounting of the impact of the legislation as we move forward. So on the basis of the decision tonight, we will then start to look at the communications and social media.
I have no problem putting out ads in our local media and so forth, a nice box around it, explaining it. I mean, that's where we're at. To me, that makes a lot of sense down the line. Because this is major. This is a major change. And I'm talking to residents. They see or hear Bill 23, but don't really understand the details and how it's going to impact them. All they've been hearing is at the high level, it's going to cost us millions and millions of dollars, and now they're frightened about it. So we need to control the narrative as much as possible if we can at the municipal level.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I think part of the challenge in this is that we don't have a lot of the information.
Correct.
Some of the regulations are still coming through. There is comments about what will come for us. For example, the comment that we will be made whole. And so it's difficult to communicate with any certainty in terms of what is clearly the impact.
And I fully understand that, Jane, with respect to the process. And when we have that information, and then it comes into a corporate communication component. But what really concerns me when I'm listening to the radio and TV, a build is out there promoting and how wonderful this is going to be for everyone in the builds, and it's all roses and tulips. And at the end of the day, it's going to be downloaded on us as a municipality. So we want to not to counter it, but to understand there's a reality check in this to the taxpayer of the town. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Chisholm. Councillor Elgar?
Thank you. Through you, Member Burton. I guess when I look at it, when the province downloaded the provincial roads to the region of Halton, the region of Halton calculated that they would need $5.3 million annually just to maintain the roads. That had nothing to do with building the bridges that were required, because the bridges were already 60 to 70 years old across Bronte Creek, the Oakville Creek, and the CNR line. The province gave the region a one-time grant of $10.6 million. That didn't quite make us whole at the region. Like, do we know how the proposal is going to make us whole now with regard to the development charges that are going to really reduce our revenues coming in that we're expecting?
CEO Closey would like to make some comments to that.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I just really wanted to address a question. We have no details. There are comments that Minister Clark has made, and I believe the Premier as well. There was also a letter sent to Mayor Burton and I think the Ontario Big City mayors making that indication, but no details have been provided. That's why there is quite a lack of information in terms of how that mitigation, the offer is there, but not the details at this point in time.
Okay. Because on December the 1st this year, our Premier said we are not going to budge on development fees. And then he also went on to say, and I quote, "It is our job as prudent financial managers for the taxpayers to drive out the waste." And my question would be of Ms. Sully is, can she highlight exactly where the waste is at the town right now to help us councillors along?
Through you, Mayor Burton, no, not at this time. It would require, we do service level reviews, we do service reviews, we look for efficiencies. The order of magnitude of this year, I don't believe you're going to find through that. You would have to look at your service levels, what you deliver, in order to reduce your costs.
So we're not aware of where this waste is hidden that our Premier seems to know about across all municipalities?
Through you, Mayor Burton, not at this time.
Appreciate that. The next one I have is the changing of parameters. I don't know who would answer that, but they've changed the parameters of what is affordable, and they've gone from, it used to be 30% of the gross family income to support housing, or it didn't have to be houses, it was accommodation. Now it's been modified to now you only have to be 80% of the average cost of the house. Like, can somebody explain how that would work? Like if I have $1 million house and if it's an $800,000 house, that's what is called affordability going forward? Is that how the town interprets it, or what am I missing?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I would rely on our colleagues in finance to help unpack the current definition of affordable housing. There's also a new category of attainable housing that's being introduced. Again, the details haven't been provided, but it's creating categories of housing that then could be exempt from charges in order to lower the barrier to entry into the marketplace for those types of units. But I don't know if there's anything else we wanted to add to that. Again, it's still an evolving work in progress.
So, okay, yeah. The N. Barry Lyons consultant stated that developers will price housing at the maximum level the market will support, and increases and decreases in fees do not affect the sale or price of the units. Is there anything in Bill 23 that ensures that the proposed reductions are going to be passed on to the supposed new purchaser of the house? Is there anything that in there in Bill 23 that makes sure that has to happen?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, the measures seem targeted at the delivery of supply, not on transferring savings through to the marketplace. So it's really targeted at the work that we do at the municipal level.
So there's nothing, it'll remain market-based as far as you know?
Yes. Again, some of those costs may flow through, or those savings may flow through as those barriers are lowered in terms of financial barriers, but there's nothing that we've seen that would compel that. Pardon me.
I was just going to add that the philosophy behind the bill is to incent the builders, and so they're reducing their charges. But Kirk is absolutely right. There's nothing in there that requires that to be transferred over to the future owners. But it's to incent the delivery of housing by the builders. That's the philosophy, I'll say, of the bill.
Thank you. Then I have, the conservation authorities will have no control over protecting our natural heritage system going forward, from what I understand. Will staff be taking over that function at the town?
Through you, Mr. Mayor. So tried to touch on that in the presentation. Again, not quite clear. We're talking to our internal professionals, but also external agencies. There's different interpretations of the legislation. The environmental review services that the conservation authorities provide currently to us is likely coming to the municipality, to the local municipality. The involvement of the conservation authorities in the regulated area, so the hazards and the floodplains, under some interpretation would remain with the conservation authorities. So their role is being really scoped down to a very narrow area, and those other services that they provide would still be required and would need to be provided in some fashion by the town. And these are really development review type services. So the ecology and those natural heritage services.
So the next one in the conservation authorities, apparently it also removes the concept of wetland complexing, which the conservation halt has been doing. And throughout the conservation Halton area that it oversees, 95% of the wetlands are complexed. Like, do staff have the technical knowledge to know how you're going to have to do stormwater management ponds since the complexing is going to be gone?
Yeah.
How is that going to work? Like, how does our poor staff, how are they going to do this?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I'll defer to Commissioner Garvey.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Councillor Elgar, your line of questioning is much appreciated because it begins when you overlay what we talked about on Monday about the impact of Bill 109 and the timeframes, and you can see how the work is starting to pile up. We're going to have to make some really strong decisions about what we're able to do in the timeframes that we're given. And certainly wetland complexing is a huge issue for the town. We believe very strongly in protection of our natural heritage areas. And so we'll have to figure out how we're going to resource it and fit it all into the limited timeframes that we have to review it. So your questions are much appreciated, and quite frankly, we just don't have the horsepower, the expertise, or the time to at this present time. So thank you very much.
The next one, I've got quite a few more, but I'm only going to do a few more. The historical level of service, and Mayor Burton referred to it when doing the development charges, how they take a look in the rear view mirror for 10 years. But now going forward, I think, is it already in effect where you'll have to look back in the rear view mirror 15 years to get an average of the level of service, which again drops the level of service for everyone, or it costs a lot more money to maintain your level of service. Like, is that in effect now?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, you're correct, Councillor, that I think that measure is intended to reduce the raising of development charges over time, which is one of the criticisms of that system by some. And whether or not it's in effect, I would perhaps defer to Nadia from legal about that. I have a little chart I could look it up on, but it might take me a minute. We do have charts, Councillor Adams. They're all, that one is in effect, thanks. So Director Charles has indicated that that measure is in effect.
Wow. Do we know the numbers at this point, how that alone will impact our taxpayers going forward?
Through you, Mayor Burton, it is in effect now, but it will actually impact us when we do our next development charges study, because we'll then have to look back the 15 years. So at this time, I don't know the impact, but as you say, it will reduce your service level.
Thank you. Now, this morning at Regional Council, Chair Carr said that for infrastructure at the region over the next 10 years, we need $5.7 billion. The previous plan, and what we are losing is what they've calculated at the region, is $3.3 billion in infrastructure. So that those DCs are gone from what the region feels. So if there is, the taxpayers, do we have anything numbers similar to that right now of the impact that will have on our taxpayers? Do we know what percent that would have on the tax rate on a per 100,000 going forward?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, we haven't done that level of analysis what the individual tax burden may be or tax increases might look like. Some of the earlier remarks were about working with new tools and new measures on the horizon to try and mitigate that and perhaps avoid that. Again, we're still waiting for some of those details to be revealed. As CO Clohessy indicated earlier, we've had a few lines in a letter and a couple conversations on the phone with provincial officials, and that's all we have right now in terms of a commitment and the details.
Okay, I just asked one more thing, and that's like in the task force that the provincial government used, they said that there were at least 200, in the report they said there's 250,000 new homes and apartments that have been approved by 2019 or prior and have not been built yet. And the Greater Toronto Area has an area of 88 Toronto, Hamilton, GTA area, 88,000 acres of already designated new development lands. In our own pipe in Oakville, do we know the number that are in the pipe that haven't been built yet, that are approved, but the developer has not done anything to make it happen? Do we have those numbers?
Again, the numbers, we do have that number, Councillor. It's a small number. And when we were looking at the content for this report, we were looking at a bunch of numbers. It was about 700 units in Oakville that have been approved and not built. And so that's 2,000 a year and 30,000 in the pipeline, and we have a swing of about 700. So I wouldn't say it's a big concern for us, but again, I understand across the province that number is different, and holding on to units is obviously a concern in terms of getting them to market.
Okay, I thank you, staff, for those questions, and I'll have comments later, but you have a daunting job ahead of you. It's unbelievable. I thank you.
Through you.
Thank you.
Mayor Burton, sorry to interrupt. I just wanted to take a moment to go back to Councillor Chisholm and communications. I think the level of engagement in the community is growing. We can always direct our residents to these meetings and the recordings of these meetings and the staff reports. We also are going to be updating with news releases and website updates as well. So what we know we can share in those ways, and then there will be more to come in the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Bigger. Thank you, Councillor Elgar. Councillor Chisholm, I'd just add that we're holding the Office of Mayor and Council newsletter until the end of this meeting so that we can provide people, and there's like more than 10,000 subscribers to that, with the latest information. And we have been all along pumping out information on it. And so I agree with Mr. Bigger that awareness is growing. This is one of those, this is like a movie. We're not at the end. You know, we're a moving target and we're in a movie at the start. So there's lots of twists and turns headed in our way. Councillor Haslett-Teal.
Thank you, Mayor Burton. Before I ask my questions, I just wanted to ask for a possible exception. So a residents association has asked and had planned on delegating tonight, and I guess the rules were not clear that about registering to delegate. So I'm going to wait for the chair's attention. So Mayor Burton, I'm asking if an exception can be made because a residents association sat online on Monday night under the assumption that they'd be able to delegate on Bill 23. They are trying to call in on Bill on the motion today, and I'm understanding that procedurally it's different because this is a discussion item. can we make an exception to allow them to speak?
Well, I'm inclined to let them speak without any procedure to do it, but if you want to do it in a formal way, move a motion to suspend the procedure bylaw to allow the delegations.
Well, while I have the floor, I'd like to move a motion to do so, to allow the resident to speak.
Is there any objection? I'm going to assume the hands on the screen are people wanting to speak rather than vote against. And so I'm going to declare that your motion carries.
Okay, so thank you, Mayor Burton. I'd ask the clerk if there's a possibility to get a call-in number to the individual.
We don't have the capability to do the call-in, but if you can send me her email address, we can send her a link to the meeting.
Okay. So I will pass my questions to the next persons while I'm trying to multitask to do that, and I will come back up with my questions in a
Well,
moment.
let me ask, let me just ask a little question. You've been working for 2.5 hours.
Take a break.
Would you like a break?
Yeah.
How about a 30-minute supper break?
Supper, where do we get supper?
10 sounds good.
Well, you want time to contact people, right? All right, I'm gonna recess the meeting until 7 p.m. Nice round number. We're ready to hear, I believe, subject to correction by council, we're ready to hear delegations. Madam Clerk, would you call the registered delegations?
The first delegation is Pierre Savignol.
Welcome, Mr. Savageau. Council looks forward to your information.
Good evening, Mayor and councillors. I feel naked here without my mask, but the prior evening on Monday, I could barely breathe. The mask was very confined for over 3 hours. I was getting a lot of carbon dioxide fumes. I know the minute's already started. Thank you very much for the opportunity. Jill, can you cursor all the way, because that's Monday's meeting. It's at the end of this presentation. I have the other notes for 7.2. Well, I'll start right away anyway. On page 4 of 12 of the report, it states the town also supports the purpose and intent of sustaining the province land use planning framework exemplified in the Planning Act and the 2019 Growth Plan. That's including providing a full range and mixed housing, including affordable housings, with the prioritization of an intensification in strategic growth areas. I understand that the province, the federal, various levels of governments, as well as other parties, are involved in providing this new housing. One of the areas which I would like to address, if you may indulge me, is in regards to what the town can do in regards to affordable housing. On April 5th, 2022, the special council meeting with the mayor and councillors initiated and approved the setting of a housing panel to study and provide housing assistance and affordability policy options. I've heard nothing to date as to where it stands. I wonder if council can provide the status of this affordable housing panel. I realize that you're planning to report out in the third quarter of 2023, but has there been a terms of reference written? And who are the members? As well as, will there be public consultation? And lastly, I just want to ask as well if the clerk can put a holder in the comments section of outstanding reports that need to be heard by council. Because I looked at the status of outstanding items, there's nothing mentioned about the report which will be coming for the affordable housing panel. So can you answer? Has the terms of reference been written?
I'd be glad to. Mr. Sauvageau, I regret that events initiated by the Canadian government and the Ontario government moved too quickly for it to make any sense to pursue a local panel to review the recommendations of the Housing Affordability Task Force. And as a result, there's no activity was undertaken, no monies were spent, and there's no report.
That's quite unfortunate, I must confess. I do believe the town has a major role that it can play in order for providing affordable housing. I'll leave it at that, but I'll make separate emails to each of the members of council and yourself in regards to that issue. On page 4 of the same report, it states that while the proposed legislation is well intended to deliver housing quickly in the province, there remains areas of concern. Specifically, I heard tonight a lot about the downloading of the regional planning matters and other costs which the town will bear. And there will be a funding shortfall with the loss of revenue for matters otherwise covered by development charges, other than development charges. I want to point that out. Now, if I'm correct, as part of the 2023 budget process, management will address the specific costs associated with downloading aspects of Bill 23. Please correct me if I'm wrong with that statement.
Mr. Sauvageau, the budget process always addresses the required spending and the required and desired spending and the sources of revenue to fund it, and the difference between all other sources of revenue and those spending levels is what we then distribute, we allocate to property tax. And I would note for your concern that the evidence we've heard so far is that it's too soon to know what the exact impacts will be. If we take the Premier at his word, in the letter he wrote me, we're going to be made whole, in which case there would be no impacts. So please stay tuned. I believe you are aware that in-year budget adjustments are a permitted activity for councils in Ontario. And so you may also be aware of the health of our reserves. So that's why you're not seeing any panic from me on this.
Yes, thank you very much for that information. I just wanted to highlight, as a taxpayer, which I'm part of the town of Oakville, will I be able to see these costs that are reduced from the region's 2023 or whatever budget in the future, and the associated costs allocated to the town's budget? Because what I see personally is the fact that if the region is no longer providing the services, the town has to. So I want to see a drop in the budget for the region and an increase in the budget for the town. It's simple math, plus, minus.
Well, you'll have to stay tuned. As I just explained, and I think you know very well, budgets and taxes are set based on the prescribed methodology from the province. You add up all that you're going to spend, you subtract from it all other sources of revenue, and the balance is what goes to the property tax. So it's not a given that ours would go up to the same degree that the regions may come down. But in any event, we're going to see soon enough.
I'm looking forward to that.
I have no doubt.
Okay. And lastly, I have seen many OPAs coming forward to council. However, there hasn't been a clear picture how it relates to the whole town. I see, like, for instance, we've recently, 7.1, we heard an OPA in regards to numbers here. Now we're going to have the Midtown OPA or development coming through probably in 2023. However, to me, it's done in isolation rather than looking at the town as a whole. What I would like to see, it isn't there, but prior to 2019, the town had a map of the livable Oakville plan, and it stated specific areas. This is how many new houses we expect. This is the amount for employment. Can a current map, be done in regards to that?
Well, Mr. Sauvageau, we do have a comprehensive official plan. It does give that comprehensive picture, and individual applications are processed under that umbrella. So if you want to, you can see things in isolation, but anytime you want to, you can also refer to the master document. And in the staff reports, they always describe the context that you're talking about. There is no official map of the nature that you describe having seen, but we have from time to time issued informational, informal maps, and we'll certainly take that suggestion under advisement.
I appreciate that very much because as an individual, I've done a lot of search on the internet at the town, at the region, and that map only exists historically. There's nothing up to date right now, especially with regards to what the province expect the town to grow in the number of housing and employment.
I'll be glad to send you the
I appreciate that
official map 1 from the region's plan and our counterpart map 1. They're both freely available.
I looked at that. It really doesn't address the issues with respect to specific areas as a whole to determine exactly what is going on in the town in regards to what the town plan. Because I heard the other night as well, for instance, Midtown will be an area of higher density, but it doesn't state what the density will be, what's anticipated as to what are the stories will be within those specific areas. So I want to see the whole picture rather than just a narrow focus. When an OPA is bought by a developer or a planner, not the planner, developer or building owner of the land, it doesn't provide a clear picture. I'm sorry to say that, but that's where I will leave it. I understand what you have to say.
Well, I will assist you by providing you with a copy of the official plan amendment draft presented by the town earlier this year, which is going to be back before the public and council in the new year. And I think that may help you.
I hope so.
The map, sir.
Pardon me, Burton. If not, I will come back to you again with this matter because I looked at the OPA and I looked at all the information that I saw on site. I'm sorry to be not rude, but I'm passionate in this issue because
well, whether you're passionate or not, you're interrupting me in my effort to answer your question.
No, you did answer. You stated me, and I disagree with that. Sorry,
your most charming style.
No, it isn't at all. I agree with you. But I'm not a charming person when it comes to matters like this, which I think the whole town of Oakville needs to hear. I understand what you're saying. I'm looking forward to that information that you will provide me. Thank you very much. And lastly, just one more issue. I know I'm out of time. The city of Mississauga, just one area which I completely forgot about affordable housing. It's one of my areas of concern. There's a regulation which will be forthcoming, and the last date of submission for interest or whatever discussion on the items in regard to the vacancy, rental vacancy bylaw, and other municipalities like the city of Mississauga as well as Toronto has done a bylaw stipulating as to what the replacement of affordable housings, which has been taken away as a result of knocking down, demolishing, like for instance, a 5-story apartment, which will come at 50 Spears, I believe. One of the areas of concern is what's going to happen to those residents. They're not wealthy as majority. I think it's 80% of the population of Oakville makes over 100,000. The people in that area do not make over 100,000. I mean, they are in need of affordable housing. And I want to ensure that the units that have been eliminated or will be eliminated will be replaced with affordable housing for a certain length of time. And a potential exists for a bylaw to be issued in that remark.
Thank you very much for your suggestion. We've heard from our professional staff that the Planning Act does not give us that power. So we'll certainly look into it for you, but that's what we've heard.
Well, sorry, I've read some legal documentations in regards to Bill 23, specifically with respect to that issue. And as it states right now, it doesn't prevent the town from issuing as such a bylaw. I know, correct me if I'm wrong, I know what you're saying, but based on legal opinion from other legal firms, that's not the case. What we'll see in regards to potential regulations coming in the future, that may be clarified.
Thank you for your suggestion.
No problem. I'm out of time. I'm sorry that I may seem a little rude. I'm not really, to be honest with you. No, well, honestly, Mayor Burton, you've seen me in action previously. I'm a very understanding individual, but as a resident, not a town employee, I stand to ensure that the residents' issues and concerns are addressed. It's as simple as that. Please do not take me as being rude. Please do not do that.
Thank you for your efforts tonight.
Oh, well, thank you very much, Mayor Burton. I look forward to hearing from you with respect to the various issues you say about Chart 1 for the OPA. Have a good evening.
Thank you for coming.
Thank you.
Madam Clerk, would you please call the next delegation?
The next delegation is Pamela Knight.
It's
Good
Ms. Knight,
evening.
welcome. Council looks forward to your information.
Thank you. Just as a matter of note, I wish to address the motion that will be before you this evening. Is this an appropriate time, or should I wait until later in the agenda?
Which motion are you asking about?
I believe there was a motion being brought for Bill 23. Has that been discontinued?
No, we're on that item now, and we waived the procedure by law to welcome you to delegate on the matter, and we welcome your comments.
Okay, great. I just wanted to make sure that I was at an appropriate time to address the motion.
This is the time.
Thank you so much. Since the introduction of Bill 23 in late October, we have seen municipalities across Ontario stand up and respond to its policies. Those responsibilities have reflected a uniform set of issues that we do not see reflected in this motion. I'd like to highlight a number of our concerns. Bill 23 is a clear violation of First Nations rights. The motion contains no recognition of that fact and no words regarding its inevitable adverse environmental impact on traditional territories. Citizen opposition to the bill is mounting, and rightly so. There are growing protests across the province. Why is the motion devoid of any denouncement of the stripping of our fundamental democratic rights? Why do we not underscore that Oakville is ready to get housing built, but not at the expense of parks, affordable housing, the environment, our farmlands, the green belt, heritage, and taxpayers? Why is there no stated opposition to the removal of powers from our conservation authority to preserve our wetlands and protect communities against flooding? Why is there no reference to the fact Bill 23 disregards the advice of its own task force and that the province has offered no evidence that the bill will deliver additional affordable housing? Why is there no opposition to the removal of planning authority from Halton Region, the repeal of its official plan, and the ensuing confusion and ultimate delay of housing supply it will create? Why is there no insistence the province delay the implementation of its bill in order to preserve the charges we levy on new development to fund infrastructure? Why is there no opposition to the suggestion by the province that cities are somehow treating development charges as slush funds, and that their seeming lack of knowledge in how they are utilized is, to quote former Ajax Mayor Steve Parrish, shamefully misleading and dangerously ignorant? My last point is one that deals with process. We found this motion on the town's website at 4 o'clock on Monday afternoon. It had not been posted in the days leading up to the meeting. Some of you don't know this, but many of you do, and that's the fact that residents associations often need a vote from their board of directors in order to delegate at a meeting like this one. Issuing a piece like this motion at 4 o'clock in the afternoon virtually guarantees very little in terms of feedback from residents. That isn't a good look for council, and it's not a good look for the town of Oakville. Given the current climate of mistrust between constituents and their levels of government, such actions do nothing to dispel those feelings. Thank you so much for your time and for accommodating me this evening. That concludes my remarks, and good evening.
Thank you very much for your information. Are there questions for the delegation? Councillor Haslett-Deal and Councillor Duddick.
I just want to thank you for taking the time and actually waiting on Monday night as well to bring your comments forward to council. And I can assure you that there are many of us that have deep concerns about Bill 23, and there'll be further actions taken by the town, I'm sure.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Duddick?
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. I just wanted to add my voice of thanks, especially given that up until this point, our focus has been largely of an economic, financial component, rather than good planning principles, public engagement, the green belt being destroyed, various other aspects of Bill 23 that have equal concerns, but I don't see it being captured in the motion thus far, other than solely from the financial. So as I say, I have big concerns, and I appreciate the fact that you took the time to raise them.
Thank you, Councillor Duddick. All right, Council, I think it's time to make a decision. Councillor Haslett-Deal, you had your hand up a second ago.
Sorry, I just want to make sure I know where we're headed, because I did have some questions on Bill 23. Are we asking those questions and then possibly referring back to staff?
In the circumstances, well, you certainly can ask questions. The situation we find ourselves in is the answers to most questions are it's too soon to say. Council could provide staff, you know, if your intention is to refer it back to staff for more information, council could provide its questions by correspondence to staff as they occur to you. I mean, you don't have to cut yourself off, but, you know, ask or not.
So I am going to ask some of my questions, so
you
thank
have the
you
floor.
for that. And then I will potentially move something. So I just wanted to make sure in the report, because we are directing people to look at the staff report and familiarize themselves more with all the detail that you have been able to provide. And I take everyone's deep concern that you don't have all the details because you don't have the regulations. But in the actual report, it uses the phrase additional 3 units. Could you please clarify? It is 3 units on a property, not an additional 3.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you for the question. Yes, it's a total of 3 units per lot. So if there's an existing unit, could add a basement apartment, for example, could add a carriage house as well, for a total of 3 units.
Okay, that's what I had understood, and if somebody reads that, they might think now we're headed to 4, and I just wanted to be clear. Can you also just clarify for me that it talks about zoning by the MTSA, the plan must be in place by the end of 2023. So is that for all of the growth areas along, so Bronte, Midtown, they must all be approved by 2023, end of 2023?
Through you, Mr. Mayor. The way the legislation has been written, our understanding is that once a plan is in place for an MTSA, so in this case for Bronte Go, the municipality has 1 year within which to have the corresponding zoning, in other words, pre-zoning those MTSAs, after which the province could assign that zoning.
Okay. Thank you. And in regards to development charges, is there any, and you probably have to go away and find this, but is there anything in the bill, or do you think it will be forthcoming, that tells us about the size of what will classify as a 2 or 3 bedroom? Because I have a bit of a concern about seeing developments where they claim it's a 2 bedroom, it's 700 square feet. I'm not quite sure how that works for a 2 bedroom. And given that we have this pressure to grow, clarifying, is it the number of units and what's the size of those units that are required would be helpful to the public to understand, are we building something that people will desire and benefit from?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, there hasn't been anything in legislation that I've seen which provides some definition around unit sizes, complement of bedrooms, et cetera. I don't know if Ms. Sully would have any difference on that. And again, because there's so much outstanding with this with respect to regulations, et cetera, if there's further information that comes to us which provides that clarity, we'll certainly keep council apprised.
Okay, thank you. In the section that talks about third-party appeals, I've had a residents group ask me if the elimination of their right to appeal C of A approvals is a violation of their constitutional rights. Is the town able to answer that question, or do I refer them to another lawyer?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I think that would be the best advice, is to seek independent counsel on that.
Okay, so while I have a series of other questions, I'm prepared to move that we receive the staff recommendation and direct the staff to report in the new year, providing further details and clarification on the impact of Bill 23 and the commitments that the province is making in regards to, quote unquote, making us whole, and any actions the federal government may take to support what is clearly a catastrophic bill.
Thank you. Are there speakers to the motion? Councillor Adams.
Sorry. I wondered if it's possible to have that put in writing, or could I get it in writing? I heard what you read, just like to see it. The other question I have for our staff is, and I don't think it was in the motion, there's a bunch of comments that are in the staff reports with respect to items that are before the ERO, whether those ought to be sent in now on the basis of those things close and we don't get to necessarily comment on them later.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, the comments that staff have provided thus far to the province have really been seeking clarity or trying to, I guess, untangle some of the confusion. So our intent at this point is to continue to meet the deadlines that are still before us and provide those questions to the province where we need further information.
So the original staff recommendation, part 2, that reads that staff comments included in the report be submitted to the ERO to inform future regulations associated with Bill 23 is not necessary at this time?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I think we'll be doing both. So as part of that, of sending comments in, there'll be opportunity, I think, to provide the staff report as well, if so directed, and we would endeavor to do that.
Okay, maybe I'm not understanding what the original motion was here as to whether this is being captured. So perhaps the clerk could help with that. Well, I'm just asking for the pleasantry of being given a copy of what we're voting on, because I want to understand whether we're sending in these comments or not sending in these comments, or are we sending them in later? What's happening to them?
So we're receiving the staff recommendation, and if I have 3 minutes, I'll write this out. And if you want to amend it to say, and ensure that these comments are forwarded, then we can do that.
The clerk would like to consult with the chair. Can we have a second?
Please do.
Council, staff would like to type up the proposed motion and put it on the screen, and they'd like 5 minutes to do that. And so I'm going to recess the meeting for 5 minutes for them to do that. Councillor Haslett-Thiel, if you'd like to jot down your suggestion or consult with Clerk Kathy Patrick, we'll await the results. How's that? Okay, we are recessed.
Did you have it? I can't, I get my it's not working, so.
All right, everybody. Council is resuming after a brief recess to do some wordsmithing. Madam Clerk, are you prepared to put the motion or the words on the screen for everybody?
Yes, the IT staff will bring that forward.
All right. Ladies and gentlemen, council and public, there is in the agenda a staff recommendation of 3 parts. I'm going to read it as soon as I find it. And here it is. So, 1, that the report be received. 2, that the staff comments dated in the report be submitted to the Environmental Registry of Ontario to inform future regulations associated with Bill 23. And for clarity, what that means is the staff have a number of questions that they're asking the province to clarify so that we can better understand what they're doing to us. And item number 2 tells staff, yes, please ask those questions and get those answers. More about those answers in just a second. The 3rd part is that the report be forwarded by the town clerk to the Minister of Municipal Affairs and Housing, Ministry of Citizenship and Multiculturalism, Ministry of Natural Resources and Forestry, Ministry of the Attorney General, Halton Area MPPs, Halton Region, the City of Burlington, the towns of Halton Hills and Milton, Conservation Halton, and Credit Valley Conservation. And this is in aid of the goal of letting all of those people know what our questions and what our questions are, and therefore what our concerns are. And then we're going to add this 4th part here, and only this part, that staff update council and the public as they receive additional information on Bill 23, its impact on the community, and provide clarification on commitments by the province and actions by the federal government to address all of Oakville's concerns. Councillor Hazard-Deal, thank you for your wordsmithing there. And do you want to speak to your motion?
Thank you, Mayor Burton. I think what's important is that we have missing information that the staff need time to work through and get from the province. This just tries to say, in as polite of language as possible, that we need that additional information shared to council and the public, and that we recognize there's an impact for our community, and we need to better understand the commitments by the province and possibly the federal government in regards to how we're going to deal with the impact of Bill 23. So I think it says it in simple language, notwithstanding that we recognize the impact is significant.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor O'Meara?
Thank you, Your Worship. I just have a question about the term "as they receive." I mean, is this just going to be an ongoing, or are we going to have a meeting where they've got enough information to have a discussion about this, or I mean, what's the intention here? Is it just, okay, we've got a little more, let's bring it in a little more? Because I don't know whether this is going to be one big dumping or whether we're going to be dragging this out over the next 6 months. I'm wondering what the idea is of this.
I'd be glad to tell you. The idea is that every time we have a meeting and council have fresh and staff have fresh information, they produce a report that informs us. And at any time, council is always free to take whatever action is permitted by law and our procedures. So you're not limited. You can, when you think you've got enough information, you can make a statement, take a stand, whatever. But the idea is that we need more information and we want it as soon as possible.
Okay, and I just to sort of get to where I want to go, if I want to notify my residents, come and watch this meeting, because this is going to be the meeting where we do a real deep dive on everything that we've learned as of this date. I don't think that's what I'm reading here. I'm reading it's as we get it, we'll fire it out. I think the importance here is for us and staff to have answers, but also for us to promote and advertise to our residents. Now is the meeting, sometime in January or February, or whenever staff feel they have a critical amount of data to speak to the issue. So
Councillor,
I'm reading this as an ongoing thing.
I beg your pardon. Councillor, of course we will do that. Okay. When we are ready, we will do that, and we will make sure that everybody knows. I don't know why anybody would think we wouldn't. It's,
Well, I sit on the council and I thought I would, so heaven forbid other people might think that too. But I'm in favor of the referral and I support this. Thank you.
thank you. Councillor Shi.
Thank you, Ms. Mayor. I have a questions for staff. So I'm not sure if this is still, we don't have more details about a natural heritage systems, because in North Oakville, we have one of the largest this system in GTA. So in terms of, we have most of it's wetland. Does any can describe or just a little bit introduce how negative impact for those Bill 23 will change those Ontario wetland evaluation system will be impact our wetland in North Oakville.
Mr. Charles?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you for the question. One of the things that we've been trying to unpack is what the implications are to our processes and how we work with our partner agencies and what that relationship looks like going forward. As we dig into what the regulations may mean for us, how the permitting is going to work and what those responsibilities are going to entail, that's part of what we'll have to report back to council on. We're certainly well aware that there's going to be some challenges moving forward, and we need to understand what the implications are to our processes overall.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Shi. Councillor Duddick?
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Chair, I just want to confirm, similar to what Councillor Chi just referenced. And again, it goes back to what I previously spoke to, that it's not just financial, it's the bigger issue in terms of our green belt, our public engagement, our heritage, our environment, all the various aspects. So basically staff are going to be looking at those things and drilling down. Am I correct in that assumption, that we don't have to know them per se?
Yes, Councillor. In the item on the screen, can you see it?
Yep.
At the end, it says all of Oakville's concerns.
I get that. I guess what my concern is that when you say all of Oakville's concerns, have they been captured either through our discussion tonight, or do we have to submit something in writing to ensure that that's captured?
No, you don't need to contribute anything in writing. If you've already said it, staff heard you. Thank you. Earlier, I suggested that if you think of something new, don't hold back, send it in.
Okay, that's what I was trying to get some clarity, whether or not it was something that.
So we're not closing the gate. If you encounter a new concern, send it in. If you've already spoke your piece, it was caught.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Councillor Giddings.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Further to Councillor Duddick's question there, is there a timeline, or in terms of, we can either stay for several more hours and go through the questions, or can we email those to the CAO's office? And when would you like those by, or?
Councillor, there's no need to have a time limit on when you send in your concern. There is so much coming from the province. I am sure you will have new ones. And it would be welcomed by staff to receive them if, as, and when they come to you. And look, this is going to be a 4-year movie.
I understand.
So don't hold back.
And we have pages of them. And what about residents that may be watching? Should they send those through their ward councillors, or?
I always recommend that people communicate with their ward councillors, but they're free to communicate with anybody they want. They can, the official recipient for questions and informations, the fail-safe is the clerk. So the mayor, the court, the ward councillors, the clerks, anybody they want.
Send them in.
Send them in. All questions and concerns are welcome.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Councillor McNeese.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'm in support of this motion. I've heard this bill quoted as the biggest housing bill in a generation, and we've only been wrestling with the staff report, and we only have a little bit of information. So I think we need more time. I think we need time to consult with our residents and community groups as well. I have concerns on sort of not just giving out permissions for more density, but actually making sure that these houses are built. There's agreement around the goals and the target. The only penalties I've seen in place is that permissions will be withdrawn if houses aren't built in the green belt by 2025, which we don't want anyways. But what about other density? How are we going to achieve those targets? So there's many questions that I don't believe our staff can answer at this point, and we need more time to work with our community and see what else comes out. So I'm in support of the motion. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Adams?
Thank you very much. I support the motion. I'm very happy to make sure that we're sending in the staff concerns and comments that are in the report. Bill 23 obviously has incredibly huge impacts on the way municipalities function and our communities will be built. As you've read in our staff report and you heard from our staff tonight, the financial impact to Oakville alone could be costing residents hundreds of millions of dollars. And if that's not mitigated by making us whole by the province or some other method, and so that is a number one issue. And so I wanted to thank Mayor Burton. You did send in a letter earlier to the province with respect to this issue, and it's a prime issue, but it doesn't take away the many other concerns that we've got that are listed in our staff report and have been talked about to some degree tonight already. The ability for us to, as local communities, to manage development, to manage the built and the natural heritage that we've got. We talked about the green belt a little bit. Successfully make use of inclusionary zoning and make sure that it actually creates affordable housing that's with us for a long period of time. Ensuring that developers are actually making use of the permissions that they've already got. There's a whole host of issues, and I look forward to the further discussions that I'm sure we're going to have over, as Mayor Burton said, a number of years. My view is we're in for a couple of years of incredibly fast turnaround times of provincial changes, so get ready.
Thank you, Councillor Adams. Councillor McNeice for a second time?
Oh, no, he didn't put his hand down.
Councillor Adams? Okay. All right, thank you, everybody. Before I call the vote, I wonder if I could just make one or two brief comments. What appears to be going on here, if you know your Ontario planning history, and I've been reading up on it, there is a wonderful book called on the history of planning in Ontario. It's called Planning Toronto, and it covers the period from 1940 to 1980, and it's by a distinguished University of Toronto professor of history, Robert White. And what it teaches is that what appears to be going on right now is a reversal, that is to say, a re-centralizing of planning back to the province and an undoing of the decentralization of planning that began 50 years ago when the province created the regions. And the province owns the cities and the regions, and it's their call. And I make no judgment about their decision. It's their decision. I didn't run for the legislature or for premier. I ran for mayor. I do know this. I know that COVID taught us that the population expects all four levels of government to work together constructively and cooperatively. And I know that the Municipal Act, which governs what we do, calls on us to deliver municipal services, quote, efficiently and effectively, unquote. I'm proud of how efficiently and effectively this council delivers municipal services, thanks to our adoption, and so far we're the only government in Canada to have adopted it, of performance-based program budgeting, which is in wide use in more than half of the states in the United States and the federal government in the United States. So I know that we will withstand any audit of how we treat development charges, because we're scrupulous about following, and I emphasize this, the province's own rules about development charges. Now, there's been some suggestion that some people are, quote unquote, whining about Bill 23, et cetera. And I have tried, and this council tonight has tried, I think, to not be whining, but rather to work in that cooperative spirit where all four levels work constructively and cooperatively. And what we're trying to avoid with our questions is a taxpayer revolt from what appear to be holes or counterproductive or unintended consequences. We're literally, in my view, doing the provincial government a favor by calling out these questions. I take great comfort from the letter the Premier wrote, promising that he would keep us whole. I note that throughout COVID, the province kept us whole. I note that the province did not hesitate to step up and make a major contribution to make possible the saving of the Ford Motor Assembly Plant in Oakville. And I also know that the Premier went out of his way to assist us in saving the cultural heritage landscape of the Glen Abbey Golf Course. So based on the record of what's been done, as opposed to things that have been said, I have reason to believe that he can be trusted, and that, you know, when he says something, he means it. If I'm wrong, well, then I'll be disappointed. But up to now, he's built a huge reservoir of credibility, at least for me. And so I'm looking forward to him being as good as his word, because so far he's been as good as his word on the things that matter most to Oakville that I've just ticked off. So with that, I will support this as well. I think it's a good idea when you don't know the full story to hold your fire, and that's certainly what we're doing. So can I put the vote? Is anybody, is there anyone opposed to the motion? Madam Clerk, there is no opposition. I declare the motion carried. Thank you, everybody. It would now be in order. No, we have to go to Heritage. Where did that page go? Speaking of a law, an abiding, I found it here. All right, so we now are going to item 9.1, the Heritage Oakville Advisory Committee minutes. There's a recommendation pertaining to item 4.1 of the Heritage Oakville Advisory Committee minutes from its meeting November 29th. And we need to approve or refuse that, and we need to receive the remainder of the minutes. 4.1 is a heritage permit application for 1475 Lakeshore Road East concerning the relocation of a house, the demolition of existing structures and wings, and construction of new additions. Is there a mover for this motion? Councillor Giddings, thank you. Is there any objection to this motion? Madam Clerk, there being no objection, the motion carries. Thank you, Councillor Giddings. It would now be in order for someone to move that we rise and report to council. Councillor Longo, thank you for that. Is there any objection? There being none, that carries, and I rise and report that the Committee of the Whole has met and has made recommendations on consent items 4.1, 4.2, and 4.3, public hearing items 6.1, 6.2, and 6.3, discussion items 7.1 and 7.2, and advisory committee minutes, item 9.1, as noted by the clerk. It would be in order now for a mover and seconder to adopt this report. Councillor Elgar and Councillor Chisholm, thank you. Any objection? There being none, the report is adopted. Thank you, everybody. I now call for any new business. All right. I'd like to inform you that it's in order for a mover and seconder for consideration and reading of the bylaws. And I'll just note that the bylaws as listed in the agenda include bylaw 2022-089, and we will not be passing that bylaw because we deferred that matter. So let me see if I got a mover and seconder. Did I already get one? Councillor O'Meara.
Your worship, just I did forget in the new business of a congratulatory nature. Is that okay?
Pardon?
I did forget one item of a congratulatory nature. I apologize for that.
No need to apologize. We're friends and flexible here. Go ahead.
I did just want to thank Councillor McNeese and myself hosted a Brawny tree lighting last Friday, and it was a success in spite of the rain. But we do want to thank everyone who participated and town staff for putting that together really quickly. Yourself, Your Worship, for coming and helping with the tree lighting, Farm Boy, and we had a great little singer from Bandology named Ishan who was fantastic. So we did want to thank everyone and thank the community for coming out and celebrating that, and we look forward to doing that many years to come. Thank you.
All right, well, thank you, Councillor O'Meara, and in return, would you be good enough to move the consideration reading of the bylaws? And Councillor McNeese, I don't think we've had you on the minutes yet. Would you please second it? Sorry? You will, thank you. Is there an objection? There being none, the bylaws are considered and read. Thank you, everybody. And that, so help me. Pardon? Oh, I beg your pardon. Councillor Nanda.
Hi there. I also wanted to do something congratulatory. We wanted to thank our residents as well for our first Santa visit to the Oakville Public Library 16-mile branch. Everyone came out and supported, and we're very happy to see Santa come and visit us up north of Ward 7. And thank you for everyone who was able to attend. Yeah.
Thank you, Councillor Nanda. I'm sure everybody had a great time. I regret I was unable to be there. Unless I'm wrong, we've now finished all the work of the meeting. I want to thank everybody for their day and a half of outstanding contributions. It's been terrific working with you, and this meeting is ended.